raging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. Is there a concerted effort to keep Reform UK out of the government? Tactical voting is something that is growing, and it's really interesting looking at some of the polling that we've been looking at on this show, and we'll look at the show later on, that there could well be an anyone but Nigel movement that is happening. We see evidence of that in Caerphilly in Wales. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Venezuela, about President Nicolas Maduro. What happens now? Is it all about oil? What about the military implications of it? A daring thing by the US to go in and do it. We'll get some of the details of that. We'll talk to Major General Chip Chapman as well. He's the former head of the MOD's counter-terrorism programme, and we'll see what he thinks of it all and what might happen next as well, not just from a military but a political perspective as well. We'll have a look back at what Donald Trump's been saying yesterday here on Talk. We'll talk to Maxwell Marlowe and James Bealby about all of that. Also, Keir Starmer making a pledge to families over cost of living struggles. Apparently it's all going to be fine, and actually you might think that your weekly shop is getting more expensive. You might think that your energy bills are going up, but actually if you look at the chart that Keir Starmer shows you, everything will be fine. He also says he'll be Prime Minister this time next year, but even Labour MPs are saying the cost of living drive is not going to save Starmer. What do you think about all of that? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk as well about immigration and France threatening to arrest British people who stop migrant crossings. Yes, really. And really interesting story sent to me by a viewer and listener, a guy called Spike in Wales, who's a really great guy. You can do this too. If you see something you think we should be covering, just get in touch. I'm on Twitter. You can give us a ring here. However, you can email me. However you want to get in touch. Carrier pigeon. And Spike spotted that there's a restaurant called Randall's in Pembroke Dock in Wales. It's closing down. Why? Because those business rates are tripling. We'll speak to the owners of that, and also Michael Kill from the Nighttime Industries Association a bit later on. So much to discuss here here on Talk between now and 12:30. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get your voice on the air. You can also text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. We'll play out as many of them as we can. Tech Up Dave listens to them. We play out as many as we can. 0344 499 1000. Please keep them to less than a minute so we give everybody an opportunity to get on air, whatever your opinion, whatever the topic. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number or ring me on the main number, which is 0344 499 1000. Stay with me here on Talk. Well, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has been speaking to the BBC this morning. Well, he actually wasn't speaking this morning, he was speaking yesterday. We know an awful lot more about what has happened since then, but the interview was broadcast this morning. We heard a lot from Donald Trump. We'll hear a bit more from him in a second. But let's hear what Starmer thinks about the US airstrikes and indeed the arrest, they would put it anyway, the kidnapping, some would put it, of the President Nicolas Maduro. This is what the Prime Minister thinks.
What I can say is that the UK was not involved anyway in this operation. And as you expect, we're focusing on British nationals in Venezuela and working very closely with our embassy. So I will want to talk to the President, I will want to talk to allies. But at the moment, I think we need to establish the facts. As I say, I can be absolutely clear that we were not involved in that. And as you know, I always say and believe we should all uphold international law. But I think at this stage, fast-moving situation, let's establish the facts and take it from there.
Well, Donald Trump gave an hour-long press conference yesterday. Very interestingly, I'll get into this with Chip Chapman in a second, actually. He didn't even mention the opposition leader. It was a journalist who mentioned that and said, hold on now, is the opposition leader still in charge? Well, the Americans say they're in charge of Venezuela. He was talking about Venezuelan oil as well. They have loads of oil. They have more oil, I think, than Saudi Arabia, something like 300 billion barrels to Saudi Arabia's, I think, about 260 billion barrels. Let's hear what the American president said yesterday.
We have to be surrounded by safe, secure countries. And we also have to have energy. Very important. We have to have energy that's real energy, not where they're getting 4% and 5% of the energy out of the ground. You take a look, it was such a disaster. So what's going to happen with Venezuela, I think, over the next period of a year, is going to be a great thing. And the people of Venezuela will be the biggest beneficiaries.
Well, we'll get into all of that in just a second with Chip Chapman, but just before that, let's hear what the opposition is saying. The Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, spoke to Mark a little bit earlier on this morning. This is what Priti Patel said.
What's your reaction as Shadow Foreign Secretary to the events of the last 24 hours in Venezuela?
Mark, first of all, we've seen what has been an incredible military operation. But fundamentally, Maduro was an illegitimate tyrant. He was an absolute oppressor who oppressed his own people. He has destroyed Venezuela, their economy. Every single aspect of that government was corrupt and corrosive. And I think now, we've got to watch what the Venezuelan people do themselves, because they're the ones that are desperate. They've been fighting for freedom. They want their freedom and democracy back. So I think really now we've got to there's another wait and see, but we need to really dock into what could be the political next steps.
Priti Patel there, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, speaking to Mark Dolan a little bit earlier on this morning. Major General Chip Chapman is with me, the former head of MOD's counter-terrorism. Chip, I want to talk about so many different aspects of this, but can we just talk about the incredible surgical nature of this? There's some really astonishing detail that's been put into the public domain about this. Quite a lot of the papers talking about this very, very daring raid as a military operation. Whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, you cannot ignore the fact that this was highly trained American forces who did a very audacious and precise job.
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to say is that from September, when the Venezuelans and Maduro were posited to be a foreign terrorist organization, that unleashed the CIA to go in and compromise various people. And really, in terms of the operation, you would say in terms of the decapitation operation, because it really was a leadership decapitation operation, that you either had the most incompetent security forces surrounding Maduro or the most compromised, because what the CIA managed to do is to do a pattern of life over a number of months to get the absolute fidelity on where he was going to be at a certain time with the security forces there. And so as a military operation, this is an extremely effective, capable operation. Now, it was a raid, and a raid, you go in and you come out. That is absolutely different than boots on the ground for any future posture. So the real test of this is that leadership decapitations have been successful from time to time in insurgencies. So, for example, in that part of the world, the taking out of Guzman, the leader of an insurgent group in Peru called Shining Path, meant that that organization collapsed. The same thing happened with the FARC in Colombia with Reyes and Cano. Whether that really means that Maduro leads to regime change is the really big thing, or do you have a continuity of people who are there? Because it's okay at the moment to say that America will run Venezuela until such time as they can do a safe, proper and judicious transition. But at the moment, they don't actually run anything. And therefore, you've got a triangle occurring at the moment. The three sides of the triangle are pressure. You've got Hesketh saying, for example, that we set the terms, a kind of comply or else. Big stick policy, which is sort of the...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but on that big stick element of Pete Hegseth, incredibly, that he has said, you know, watch out, rest of the world, we can come and we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. That seems to be unchecked by others.
Yeah, and that's potentially one of the problems with it, if depending on your interpretation of international law. Does it set a geopolitical precedent for the future where you degrade that? Now, one of the things, for example, if you believe in the UN Charter under Article 2 brackets 4 close brackets say that the sovereignty and independence of a country should be inviolate, and only sets two conditions when you can take that apart, and that is either if you've got a UN Security Council resolution or an act of self-defense under Article 51. Neither of those applies. So really, have you got sort of might is right and American exceptionalism sort of operating? Now, we kind of think it is, to be honest, at the moment, because of what came out in the recent national security strategy of America, where essentially it was a reinforcement of the Monroe Doctrine from the 1820s.
Yes, certainly, and it is interesting about what Trump has now said. There are many saying this is about natural resources. He has talked about oil and the strategic importance of that. What does the rest of the world do? How should Keir Starmer actually react to this? What should the international community do? Shall we just wait and see what happens?
Well, I think we've always known that this part of the world is in America's sphere of influence, and you know, regardless of what America do, they are still a praise from Madeleine Albright of late 20th century. They are the indispensable nation. You know, they are the one hegemonic power still in the world, and it's a good thing to keep on the right side of America. So you won't go criticizing them. I think what is more interesting, again in a legal term, is that in September, Trump said that the conflict against the drug barons was based on the law of war for a non-international armed conflict. Now, under that, Maduro, as the head of the cartel of the Sun, that's what he said at the time, could have been treated as a prisoner of war for the duration of the conflict. The problem with that at the moment is if the drugs will still continue to flow, so leadership decapitation and a change of regime, if that occurs, doesn't mean that the drugs won't.
And some arguing already, Chip, that actually the drugs element is a bit of a fig leaf because Trump pardoned the president of Honduras, who was in jail on drugs charges as well.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a fig leaf, because I do believe he wants to try and secure America from drugs. The reality of the drugs is there was a report out in May from the DEA, which actually sort of said that the main cocaine flows into America are from Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. Venezuela might be a transit route, and the main problem is actually fentanyl, which enters the USA via Chinese producers and Mexican criminal organizations. So are you going to take those on? Now, if you then go to the oil sort of perspective on this, Trump has sort of re-established a new foreign policy, really, for America. We always used to say that American foreign policy was based on either Wilsonian liberalism, where you emphasize democracy and human rights. He didn't mention any of that yesterday, or pragmatic realism. You know, you look at the world as it is and you deal with it as. What he's really gone to is a kind of commodity mercantilism, where mercantilism is a sort of 18th century concept. In fact, British Empire was built on it, where state power is used to secure economic advantage. And if you were to say this is four-dimensional chess, which you don't think it is, you could say that potentially he would be using Venezuelan oil to undercut Russian and Iranian oil to emphasize the power of America going forward. So he is promoting national wealth and resource control. And in that sense, America first actually means an economic and strategic advantage in a furtherance of US interests. It does both of those things. The caveat on all this is what comes in the day after scenario. It's okay to say you run Venezuela, but the vice president of Venezuela, Rodrigo, has already denied that she's planned to work with the US. And what do both the Venezuelan military people and elites think of this? The military, actually, interestingly, I think the defense minister yesterday, Padrino Lopez, said that they've attacked us, but they will not subdue us. Yeah. And that's the problem if you do put boots on the ground, or how you operate if you think you're going to run it. Because what core functions of a state and the independence of Venezuela might they caveat? So, for example, some of the core functions of the state, including formation of the market, administrative control, delineation of citizens' rights, and management of state assets. If you take those away from Venezuela, you could get to the position where people do revolt against you. On the other side of that, it is that key thing about, are the people of the country so cheesed off with socialism that the reality check means that they will support a new wave. But you're not going to get that new wave, I don't think, while you've got the Vice President Rodrigo or competitors for power, including the Defense Minister and Interior Minister. But he didn't mention anything about the opposition and the sort of stolen election of last year.
And then on the Nobel Prize winner, as well, he didn't mention her. In fact, a journalist brought it up and he said that she didn't have perhaps the authority to run the country. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. Chip, thank you. Major General Chip Chapman, former head of MOD counter-terrorism. We're aware of some audio issues that we're having with our clips. We're working to sort it. I'm sorry if you're having issues with them. We are going to play another couple of clips now. I hope you can hear them and see them properly. This is Priti Patel on the Prime Minister and his own position. Priti Patel spoke to Mark Dolan about an hour ago here on Talk. Let's just remind ourselves what she said.
Priti Patel, what does it say about the UK's diplomatic standing that the Prime Minister wasn't consulted about these actions?
Well, you won't be surprised by my own view. I think Keir Starmer is incredibly weak, and I do not think he is strong enough on the international stage. And, you know, we speak about the special relationship with America. We're Five Eyes countries. As I said, you know, I've got a lot of history working with America on security and intelligence operations previously. I just don't think America looks to the United Kingdom in the way in which it once did.
Alliance there, that's the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia and the UK. The question I've always had is, why is it not called 10 Eyes? That's what I want to know. Anyway, Priti Patel also was asked by Mark about legal migration and past regrets, and that she was Home Secretary. Of course, she's Shadow Foreign Secretary now, but she was Home Secretary.
Do you regret the scale of legal and illegal immigration that played out whilst you were Home Secretary?
Of course, and that is why we have been very clear now, and you've asked about our direction of travel, why we have set out incredibly strong policies that involve some very big policy actions, such as leaving the ECHR. So I noticed before I came on your program, you had a column down your screen about migrants coming to the country. If I may say, that should be illegal migrants. Yeah. I'm also the only Home Secretary that has used that term, illegal migrants, because the left and Labour now in government, they want to normalise all of this stuff, and it's not about normalising that. We don't have a deterrent in our country. You know my policies and my approach around a deterrent. We're talking about leaving the ECHR, leaving the ECAT, which actually enables far too many of these spurious cases to come to immigration courts and tribunals.
Shadow Foreign Secretary, but previously the Home Secretary under the Conservatives, of course, speaking to Mark Dolan a little bit earlier on here on Talk. Ben in London's been in touch and says Starmer's response on Trump's arrest of the socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro was complete and utter nonsense. He sounded like a fish out of water. Why? Because he was out of his depth, and Trump did not, nor does he, trust Starmer and his government, which is why he was never informed of what is going on, says Ben. Brad in Cambridge says it's so embarrassing that spineless Starmer needs to ask his mentor Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, what he thinks before giving us his own opinion. At least Farage just give a straight opinion, says Brad in Cambridge. Interesting one from Farage, actually, from Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK. He was saying that he believes it's a breach of international law, but it's unconventional, but maybe it'll be effective. That is a nuanced opinion of someone who put that out in the public domain, put that on Twitter, pretty straightforwardly a few hours after the information came into the public domain about this big raid. It's really the biggest story in the world right now. Leslie says Trump knew what Maduro was eating and wearing, yet Starmer says he didn't know about the Egyptian anti-Semitic anti-UK tweets. It didn't cross his desk, says Leslie. Well, that's a really interesting point. And some of the detail, yes, I think the detail as well, Leslie, that I read was that Trump knew and the American forces knew. There's such detail on Nicolas Maduro. We're going to talk in a minute actually about the nature of this raid. They knew the pet food that his pets had. That's what they knew. Another person says, can we get Trump to come over here and take Starmer away? You're not the first person who has suggested that one to me. And thank you to Sharon, who says, I don't give a fig. It's a different word that she's used, beginning with S and sounding a bit like hit, about what Trump wants to do with Venezuela. At least Trump has got some backbone. What has Starmer got? Zero. Lots more to discuss on all of that. We're going to the debate desk next. Maxwell Marlowe and James Bealby will be with me there. Stay with us here on Talk.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's just remind ourselves, a lot of people are reacting to what the Prime Minister has said about these airstrikes. Now, in fairness to him, this interview was yesterday. The BBC recorded it yesterday, played it today, and that was the time he was doing the interview. He wasn't doing it live. We know a lot more now than we did 24 hours ago, and this was before Trump's press conference. But just listen to how the Prime Minister deals with the issue here of Maduro and Venezuela.
What I can say is that the UK was not involved in any way in this operation. And as you'd expect, we're focusing on British nationals in Venezuela and working very closely with our embassy. And so I will want to talk to the President, I will want to talk to allies, but at the moment, I think we need to establish the facts. As I say, I can be absolutely clear that we were not involved in that. And as you know, I always say and believe we should all uphold international law. But I think at this stage, fast-moving situation, let's establish the facts and take it from there.
And let's just remind ourselves what Trump himself has been saying. This is from the press conference yesterday.
We have to be surrounded by safe, secure countries. And we also have to have energy, very important. We have to have energy that's real energy, not where they're getting 4% and 5% of the energy out of the ground. You take a look, it was such a disaster. So what's going to happen with Venezuela, I think, over the next period of a year is going to be a great thing. And the people of Venezuela will be the biggest beneficiaries.
Donald Trump there, the President of the United States. We are aware of some audio issues with our clips. We're working on it. We're working to fix it. I think they're clearer now. You can let us know if you're having problems with them, of course, in the usual ways. I want to go to the debate desk now. Maxwell Marlowe is with me, as is James Beatleby, political commentators. Both great to have you on the programme. How are you doing? You all right?
Good
Happy
morning.
New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Good to see you. Some of the detail of this raid, whether you think it's a good thing, bad thing, we'll get into all of that, I promise. But some of the detail is astonishing. A CIA spy in Caracas tracked Maduro's movements to facilitate the raid and got so close to the dictator that he even knew what type of food he gave his pets. US Special Forces spent weeks rehearsing Maduro's capture in a specially made replica of his presidential compound, the Mail on Sunday reports. Maduro spoke to Trump last week, but he refused his request to quit peacefully, and Trump declined to seek the authority from US Congress as he feared the operation would be leaked. I mean, the military aspect of this, whatever you think, is impressive.
Absolutely. I spoke to a friend of mine who's actually in the army about this yesterday, and I was saying, this is really cool, isn't it? And he went, yeah, it is cool. We couldn't do that, even though, you know, Delta Force, who went in, they were inspired by the SAS. So even we don't have the capabilities to do that, despite inspiring the whole thing. It is remarkable, and apparently the asset the CIA had was in Maduro's inner circle, and was just able, and been there since August, I believe, and was just able to just track everything down. So in and out in 3 hours. I was actually thinking about this. The Epping Hotel asylum seeker took 2 days to find him in our own city, in our own country, and they just were in and out in 3 hours. It's remarkable, absolutely brilliant.
James.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to the US forces, certainly, the fact they managed to depose him without a shot being fired and nobody being killed.
Well, there were explosions, of course. There was damage done. But, yeah,
but no shots fired in anger in that respect. I think also somebody within the government in Venezuela obviously sold Maduro out. So they're not acting alone.
Yes,
clearly they're acting in conjunction with people within Venezuela. But it's an absolute testament to the US forces that they're able to do that.
James, what is your take on this? What do you make of it? When we woke up yesterday morning to this news, a real shock to some, not so much of a shock to others. In fairness to Trump, when he generally threatens something, he often follows through in so many different ways. Iran, we've seen that as well. They're looking over their shoulder too. I just wonder what you make of it. There are people saying it's a breach of international law. There are people saying he shouldn't do it. Other people saying, actually, look at so many Venezuelans in the country and around the world who are rejoicing at this to get rid of a brutal and horrific regime. What's your sort of general take on it, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I think Maduro is a wretch, let's face it, and the country is better off without him. We know whether this is the right way to go about it or not. I think that's the bottom line. They'll be much better. It should be a very rich country. They've got the largest oil reserves in the world.
300 billion barrels of oil, apparently.
One of the largest in the world. And some might say that the action that the US has taken is related to that. No, not unrelated to that.
Trump has said it, and I mean, at the moment, Venezuela is only pumping out about very, very little because of sanctions and so on. They have about 17% of the world's oil.
Yeah, I mean, there's the midterms coming up in America. There's a cost of living crisis there, as there is in the UK. They'll be looking for cheap energy, and this is obviously a way of doing it. I think I was surprised that it happened overnight. Obviously, I'm not party to what goes on in the
I'm
Pentagon.
shocked. Did Donald Trump ring you and tell you?
He didn't know.
He Snapchatted Maxwell.
Yeah, of course, very close individuals. But I think also, in terms of the pure politics of it within the US government, this is very much a victory for Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, their equivalent to the Foreign Secretary. The Trump, when he came into power, said no more wars, it's going to be US first. That's clearly not the policy now.
He's changed his tune, hasn't he, Maxwell?
Absolutely.
I think this is America first, though. This is the thing, and he was quite clear in the press conference. You know, he's moved from the Monroe Doctrine to the Dunroe Doctrine, which is that the whole of the kind of American hemisphere is only party to America. And one of the reasons he's gone into Venezuela, it's not just because of the oil, it's not just because because of the narco-terrorism that the Venezuelan government has been the centre of. If you dig into that, they're as big as the Sinaloa cartel, out of Caracas.
And that's absolutely true. But Trump also pardoned the Honduran guy who was doing essentially the same thing.
Nayib Bukele, yeah, absolutely. But remember Nayib Bukele, very right wing, and we saw
But it's not just about the sort of moral drugs element of this.
Absolutely. It's also to do with Cuba, because you have to remember that Caracas is very close to Cuba. They're supplying a lot of oil. Trump wants to crack down on Cuba. He's really fed up of having this kind of communists in America's backyard. I think by the end of this term, Cuba will have gone.
Well, it's really interesting you say that, actually, because Marco Rubio has hinted at that as well. He, of course, is a Cuban American who hates the Cuban regime. Very, very interesting thoughts there. We'll get more of them. And we'll talk about domestic political issues. Is there a conspiracy in regard to tactical voting against Nigel Farage and anyone but Nigel move as well? We'll talk too about a music festival that has banned white people from running it as it rakes in thousands of pounds in taxpayers' cash. You'll never guess who played there. Bob Vylan. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, there's so much more to talk about with all of this. I feel we've only sort of scratched the surface. What do you think as well? 0344 499 1000. And actually a really interesting question. Maybe I'll pose it to Maxwell Marlowe and James Bealby as well. Christian in Stratford says, good morning, Peter. Good morning, Christian. He says, in answer to Mark's question to Patel, to Priti Patel, Mark Dolan obviously interviewed Priti Patel earlier on, how do you feel about America removing a sitting president in Venezuela? Someone ought to explain to her that he is illegitimate in that position, as he stole the election last year. Surely that should have been her answer. Well, that's a fair point, Christian. The legitimacy aspect of this, do you feel it's legitimate, Maxwell? Does it actually matter? And there are some people saying, well, Russia and China will be emboldened by this. I'm not sure Russia and China are really thinking, well, what we can and can't do is dictated by what Donald Trump does. But similarly, sorry, I know there are about 17 clauses to this question, but similarly, can Donald Trump claim moral authority against Putin when he's saying going into sovereign territory, removing the leader?
I don't think it matters. I think genuinely, international law is what we call a spook. It doesn't exist, really. Who's going to arrest Donald Trump? Are the international law police going to pile into DC and arrest him? There's actually a convention...
And America doesn't recognise the International Criminal Court.
In fact, there is legislation on the books in the US that if a US soldier is indicted in The Hague, they have the legal authority to go in and take them out. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And everyone's getting up in a fuss about this because, what would Putin or China say? They're doing it anyway. They've been doing it for the past 20 years. Look at Georgia, look at Crimea, look at Ukraine. All of the spying, all of the international espionage. They've been doing it for decades. This doesn't change anything. I think it's really weak from Europe and from all of the parties, actually, Conservatives, Reform, this government, Labour, all going, we're monitoring. I think it's bad for international law. It doesn't matter.
It's also not new for the US to do this. Every US president since time immemorial has done this.
Noriega in 1979.
Well, yes, exactly. But also, Barack Obama. I can remember his name there for a minute. It's such a long time ago. He'd be quoting...
I bet the one thing you'll definitely not be able to remember is why he won the Nobel Peace Prize. No one can remember.
Well, exactly.
I don't think he knows.
He was quoting Walt Whitman while he was doing drone strikes in civilian areas. So this isn't new, but obviously because it's Trump, people say, oh, good nasty old Trump. But this is America's government. This is nothing new that's happening here. And in terms of international law, yes, I think you're probably right. I think that's bad. I think there should be some sort of international law. But does it embolden China to invade Taiwan? Probably not. They're probably going to do that anyway.
It's interesting from the UK's perspective as well, because Lord Hermer, of course, Richard Hermer, the Attorney General, he's the man who, in his career, sued numerous governments for illegal rendition. So how the UK actually responds to this, another aspect of this too, Maxwell.
Yeah, absolutely. I think international law is the kind of last redoubt of scoundrels at the end of the day. Because look at how we're giving way.
Is that fair?
No, really, I don't think so. Because look, when we see people pushing this line, we can see Mauritius, for example, we're handing over Chagos Islands because of international law. We can see no one's justifying helping the Ukrainians based on international law. It's all to do with realpolitik. And it's going to be the same with Taiwan. Let's remember, at the moment, there are 4 different military exercises going around Taiwan because the Chinese, this is before, by the way, the Venezuelans. No one's justifying this stuff based on international law. None of our actions are justified based on international law. It's all to do with, essentially, Lord Palmerston, which is we don't have any allies, we only have interests. And that's the only thing that matters when it comes to foreign policy.
Yeah, I think you could probably ascribe some sort of grand plan to what's happening here with Trump. Probably isn't. It's probably a bit of ego. But I think we do now have the situation where we've got 2 great powers. We've got the US and China, and then Russia perhaps in the middle somewhere between the two, allied with China at the moment. So, you know, Britain's role in this is largely irrelevant, to be honest. And I don't.
Well, we don't really have one, do we?
No, exactly. Yeah. I don't want to use the B word because it's very much a safe space for a Sunday morning. But since Brexit, we are essentially isolated from international law and international defence policy because we're talking about blocks. And Britain is
we're still a member of NATO.
We are a member of NATO, but NATO is now funded by Europeans largely.
Well, the Americans are the biggest funders.
Yeah, but is that going to continue? Are they going to pull out?
It's a fair point. Let's talk about this country, specifically Keir Starmer. He has been speaking to the BBC. Let's hear another clip from him saying he will be Prime Minister this time next year. He was speaking to the BBC, recorded the interview yesterday. It was played out by them this morning.
Laura, under the last government, we saw constant chopping and changing of leadership, of teams. It caused utter chaos, and it's amongst the reasons that the Tories were booted out so effectively at the last election. Nobody wants to go back to that. It's not in our national interest. We know from that evidence what happens if you go down that chaotic path. I will be sitting in this seat by 2027, and if this long-form interview works, we can try it again in January of next year as well.
Well, there we are. Nobody wants an election. I think Keir Starmer should have a wee look at the texts and tweets and WhatsApp messages and voice notes and telephone calls that I receive on a daily basis saying there should be an election right now. People often calling on the King to decide that there should be an election. He doesn't really have that power. But anyway, there are many people who disagree with Keir Starmer on that. One of them, I would imagine, is Priti Patel. She told Mark her views on the Prime Minister a little bit earlier on.
Priti Patel, what does it say about the UK's diplomatic standing that our Prime Minister wasn't consulted about these actions?
Well, you won't be surprised by my own view. I think Keir Starmer is incredibly weak, and I do not think he is strong enough on the international stage. And, you know, we speak about the special relationship with America. We're Five Eyes countries. As I said, you know, I've got a lot of history working with America on security and intelligence operations previously. I just don't think America looks to the United Kingdom in the way in which it once did.
A question that's never answered. The Five Eyes security alliance, you've got the UK, you've got Canada, New Zealand, Australia and America. Why is it not called 10 Eyes? Maxwell. No, I'm joking. Seriously, why is it not called 10 Eyes? There was New Zealand was going to pull out at one stage and then it could have been called Four Eyes. Maxwell.
Just me, yes.
No. Specifically on Keir Starmer, do you think he'll be sitting there next year? He's got a whole raft of policy, big article in the Sunday Times today, another relaunch. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, it's another relaunch, another set of pillars. I think it's
which phase are we in? Or are you just phase?
I think we're on phase 5 now or something. It keeps going and going. And he said also, you know, he's already sending the messages around on the local elections. He says it's not a referendum on Westminster governance.
That's what they are.
They are.
They always are. And he in opposition said numerous times that that's exactly what they were.
Exactly. So we just quoted back to him. But it doesn't matter at the end of the day. I think it's going to be a total disaster for Labour. When I speak to Labour friends and colleagues of mine, they say, oh yes, well, things are going to be a bit of a bloodbath. And, you know, even just listening to some of the left-wing media in this country, some of the podcasts I hear from, you know, from some of the magazines, you know, what you hear is even those kind of quite die-hard Labourites are going, who are the front runners for taking over from Starmer? We're expecting it. People are making bets. They don't think he'll be leader by the end of this year. So I think he's betting on himself there, and I doubt he'll be in position, to be honest.
He has made a pledge to families over the cost of living struggles. He says this is going to be the year when you feel real change from action taken by the government. He says he's going to use every tool to make the lives of Brits better. Just speaking about podcasts there, actually, Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart on Venezuela did an emergency podcast. Yeah, you know, I mean, that is the last thing the world needs. Anyway, on Starmer and these pledges he's making, action taken by the government, he says that he's going to meet commuters to discuss help for passengers following the first freeze in rail fares in over 30 years. He'll tell families this Labour government is on your side, doing everything we can to ease the cost of living and making life better. In 2026, the choices we made will mean more people start to feel that positive change. I will put that exact quote later on to the people who are closing their business because of the tripling of business rates. James?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of will Starmer be in power this time next year, yes, he will still be Prime Minister, because of the way that the Labour Party operates constitutionally. Very difficult to get rid of him. They need 80 MPs to sign a motion of no confidence, which will probably happen, but then they need to align behind one candidate. There isn't one obvious candidate to stand against Starmer. So I think Starmer is probably safe on that basis and that basis alone. I don't think he's doing necessarily a good job, and perhaps he should be deposed, but I think he is right in terms of saying, you know, this constant changing of Prime Ministers. We saw that under the Conservatives. We had four Prime Ministers in 4 years or whatever it was. It's not good for government, and when you could say Starmer's good for government, it's a different issue.
Yeah.
So I think he will be in power this time next year. In terms of the cost of living crisis, the government are doing some things to help. So the rail freeze you mentioned there, we've got the national living wage increase, we've had the 2-child benefit cap, which has been removed, which lifts hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. Interest rates are the lowest they've been since 2022, because mortgages are coming down. So
Bank of England's independent. Anytime any government minister says it is a good thing that, and aren't we wonderful because interest rates are low, I jump down their throat and say it is not you, the Bank of England's independent, that was your decision. Maxwell?
They're taking £150 off energy bills.
For some people, not for everybody.
So things are happening, and the triple lock is obviously in place for pensioners. So there are measures in place to...
But you can't just tell people, you can't just say, you know, you may not feel better off, but you're going to be, and it's all going to be fine in a few months' time. Maxwell?
It's also, if you pay any tax in this country, you're going to find it's going to be really quite difficult, right? I mean, those frozen thresholds are going to pull millions of hard-working
And we've seen analysis from a rival think tank, actually, the Centre for Policy Studies, who say that
don't believe anything they say.
If you're a pensioner or if you're on benefits, you're going to have more money. If you're earning, or if your household income is something like 50 grand, which is the median income, the average salary, of course, £36,000 a year for one person, but if two people are working, in and around 50,000, actually you're going to lose about £500 a year.
Yeah, you are. It's going to be quite tough, actually, and then not including inflation in that analysis either, right? Because I expect that to continue the way it's going. There's also the case of
down.
I think it's going to. I think we won't hit deflationary measures. We'll hit some disinflation, but from the analysis that we've published today, actually, we're publishing a paper called Foreboding Fiscals, which looks at the size of the national debt, which we think will hit about 200% in the next 10 years. We think the deficit's, you know, not really going to be challenged at all, and the fact that inflation actually is going to keep quite. It's not going to slow down as much as I think the government expects because of energy bills, which is a government problem. And yes, they're taking £150 off, but if you're a business, you know, if you're dealing with those, high, you know, spending lots of money on energy, you know, that 150 quid is not going to move anywhere. And I think we're going to see a much higher unemployment level than we're currently seeing because of those business rates, because of national insurance, because of the fact that actually people aren't feeling confident in the economy. They're spending less money. So I think that's going to be a really challenging scenario moving forward.
James?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that in terms of confidence, but there's national living wage increase, so lots of people are going to get a big pay rise in April, then that's going to continue over the next 2 or 3 years. We've seen that the government are trying to do things in terms of protecting pensioners. So they did try and do some measures to bring the deficit down by getting rid of the winter fuel allowance. That's been overturned. Business rates, yes, I agree that is something that needs to be addressed. National insurance means that employing people is a lot harder. But I think generally the government is trying its best to bring down the cost of living. Whether there's more they can do is a question which will be answered over the coming months.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you agree with James Bealby? The government is doing all it can to bring down the cost of living. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. I'll be speaking to Natalie and Ben a little bit later on. A restaurant in Wales that has had to shut its doors because business rates have tripled. That's a story sent to me by a viewer. This is my show, but it's your show too. And if you send me good ideas that we should be covering, if the things we're missing, if the stuff we should be covering, the stuff the media is ignoring. Iran is a big issue. A lot of people think a lot of the media is ignoring. Loads of people sending me messages saying, Peter, you've got to do more on this. We did. We've done it every day since then. Thanks for all your messages. Neil says, where is the money tree coming? Typical left-wing money tree idiot. Amanda says, love him or loathe him, Donald Trump is exactly what the unstable world needs. Strength and leadership is required in these dangerous times, sadly lacking in our present leadership. Ben in London, oh no, I read that out earlier. And another person saying we should have asked Priti Patel, one of the many trying in the early days to get this Britain-hating Egyptian in England, about that. I don't know actually if Mark asked her about that. I'll check that. And Brian in York says, there's always something about your appearance, Maxwell. There's always someone who gets in touch to say that you look a bit like Jacob Rees-Mogg's offspring. That's not the person who has said that today. It is Brian in York who says Maxwell is a dead ringer for the late, great DJ Steve Wright.
Oh yeah, I can see that actually. I can see that, yeah.
I'll take that.
Young Steve Wright.
Young Steve Wright. I'll tell my mum. Yeah, she'll love that. Look at that. There you go.
Okay. There is Steve Wright on the, Maxwell, can you just look into this camera here? Actually, if you just look into that camera, and you can make your own mind up if you're watching whether Maxwell Marlowe looks like Steve Wright. All I can say is thank you to everybody who has messaged in and say love listening to the show, as they always did with Steve Wright on Radio 2. Lots more to discuss on the debate desk. I want your thoughts too. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about a music festival banning white people from running it as it rakes in thousands of taxpayers' cash, and of course they have platformed who else? Bob Vylan. Stay with us.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We have another comment on James from Paul, who says, sad lefties still trying to blame Brexit when the fact is our human rights solicitor, Prime Minister, has recognised a Palestinian state, which keeps us out of the loop. Would you like to respond to that, James?
Not particularly.
Okay, fair enough. And we've also been thinking, is there a Venn diagram between people who look like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Wright? If you are someone who either does look like both Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Wright, or know someone who does, please get in touch. We're going to talk now about, well, we'll talk about Reform UK in a second, because there is polling to suggest that a lot of people are tactically voting. Is there an anyone but Nigel vote out there? Will people be persuaded by all of that? We'll talk about that in a second. But before we do, I just want to speak about this music festival that has banned white people from running it, raking in thousands of pounds of taxpayers' cash. This is a Decolonise Fest, an annual punk event aimed at punks of colour, has been backed by government grants. It's a London-based festival that says white people cannot join the organising group that controls it. If that's not racist, I don't know what is. I mean, that's straightforwardly racist. Can you imagine if someone said black people or lesbians or gay people can't, or trans people can't join an organising group? Leadership positions are reserved for those with at least one parent descended from original inhabitants of non-European continents or from Roma and traveller communities. The event's stated mission is to undo colonial harms and dismantle white supremacy within the punk music scene. I was not previously aware of the problems with white supremacy within the punk music scene, but then what do I know? The Arts Council funding has supported the festival. Organisers say they will put the threat back into punk, £7,793 in a COVID emergency funding, according to the Telegraph, another £18,808 from the National Lottery. And they have, of course, had Bob Vylan, who have been there, who, of course, their lead singer, Pascal Robinson Foster. Not enough evidence, apparently. Insufficient evidence to prosecute him for shouting death, death, the IDF, which he did on national television. Maxwell, your thoughts on this?
I would just stop funding the arts from taxpayers completely. I don't think it's a priority at all. I think if you want to set up your own festival, if you want to make it succeed, then you need to do the marketing. You need to ensure it's a good, viable show, a good business, and then you can go from there. I don't see why the government is at all involved in funding, or taxpayers are funding at all, any sort of stuff, especially this disgraceful.
Any arts at all?
Get rid of all. Yeah, get rid of all of it. That's what the National Lottery's for.
James?
I could not disagree with you more, I'm afraid, Maxwell. I agree with you on many things, but not on this. I mean, funding the arts is absolutely vital to health, to mental health, to giving people opportunities, to discover new cultures. I think it's vital. In terms of this particular event, I don't know the detail, but I think it doesn't sound quite right. I think possibly they are volunteers as opposed to the people who are employed to put the festival together.
But even as a voluntary body, and you say to people, white people cannot join the organisation, the three of us would be banned simply on the status of our pigmentation. That's racism.
Well, and the fact we're all monumentally uncool as well probably would be banned on that basis.
Not true.
Yes, it doesn't seem right. But I think funding of the arts is absolutely vital, and I don't think we should ever remove that. I mean, I think arts funding should go up. There's lots of spaces, community spaces, council-run spaces which are closing down because there's a crisis in public funding.
That's true.
And that means that people's access to the arts is being limited. I think that is bad. I think arts are a positive in society.
I just don't think it's the role of the government, though. I think charities should do it. If you want to support the arts, pay your money voluntarily. I think that's fine. There's no issues with that. But what I have an issue with is because when you start setting up, arts funding through the Arts Council, you do end up funding stuff like this. And if you look back through, most, for example, taxpayer alliance stories that end up in the Sun, for example, there's time and time again thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds, more than actually a lot of people will pay tax in a year. It goes towards quite repugnant and repellent, arts festivals or groups. Kneecap, for example, the I would say, an absolutely terrible group based out of Ireland, have received tens of thousands of pounds in taxpayer-funded settlements.
Northern Ireland.
In Northern Ireland, yeah. And despite the fact that they're, I just think, completely at odds with the British public. So I think it's a complete moral hazard to get rid of all of it, and I'd return to a proper voluntaristic system where, if you like it, give them your money. If you don't have to.
What do you think about that? What do you think about what Maxwell said? Are you on his side or on James's side of that argument about arts funding, especially when it goes to these kind of places? I'm on James's. I don't think a penny should go to a London-based festival that says that white people cannot join the organising group. I think the police should be talking to them about their racism. What I do think, though, is that arts do have a role, and although we're in straitened times and we've got the highest burden of taxation since the Second World War, I want to talk now a bit about tactical voting. Could it block Nigel Farage's path to number 10? This is Liberal, Democrat and Green voters who would flock to back Labour to prevent Nigel Farage from entering Downing Street. This is polling for the Times newspaper. This is an analysis by YouGov, the big polling company, suggesting tactical voting likely to be a critical feature of the next election. Supporters of all parties prepared to switch their vote to influence the overall result. It found that 57% of Lib Dem voters, 46% of Green voters would give up their first preference and back Labour if they were in a seat where Reform UK looked likely to win. James?
Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. People are always voting tactically, and we saw that in the last election. So Labour have got a massive majority on quite a small percentage of the vote. A lot of that was tactical voting, people voting against the Conservatives after many years in power. I don't think that you could say that there's anything wrong with it. We saw that in Wales recently.
It's up to people how they vote.
By election,
but should they not just vote who they actually want to win?
It's not our system. First past the post doesn't allow that. If we had a proportional system, which I would support, then that would be different. People would be voting on the basis of the party that they wanted to vote for. But our first...
Although in a proportional system, I know you're not a Liberal Democrat, but the Liberal Democrats had 3.5 million votes. They would have far fewer seats than Reform UK had 4.1 million votes.
Oh, the irony, exactly. And Labour would have had far fewer seats, which I'm sure lots of listeners would be pleased about. So in our system, first past the post, people vote against somebody that they think is going to win. Lots of people vote tactically. That's how the Lib Dems have always done well in by-elections. I think that's the system. I'm not really sure what the issue is here.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think it's a statement of fact that people are going to keep doing this. And as you said, the Caerphilly by-election in Wales, we saw, an immense amount of tactical voting. I think what we also forget is that, on the right, with Conservatives and Reform, I think there's much more differentiation there. There's a really strong identity towards those parties for people who support them, especially with Reform. It's less so on the centre-left with with Labour and the Liberal Democrats. There's been a long, period previously where there has been kind of some coalition forming going on, at least in the last, in the 20th century. So I think it's not a new phenomenon, but I think we should definitely be expecting this. I'm not sure what Reform are going to do about this, because I think that is what is concerning them over in Millbank Towers at the moment.
I think we could be in a situation where Reform UK are the largest party, but Labour and the Lib Dems form some sort of coalition.
A supply and confidence agreement.
Confidence and supply, perhaps. I don't think that's out of the realms of possibility. When you look at what Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, is saying and doing, it's a lot of it is sort of, maybe critical friend kind of stuff, but he's not really going for Keir Starmer. I don't know if you agree with that, James.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Also, I would remind you that the next election is 3 years away, 3.5 years away. Labour are going to be in power as long as they want to be. They don't have to form an election because they've got a massive majority. So talking about this now seems to be a bit before the fact, really. There's a lot that can happen in the next 3 years, a lot that will happen in the next 3 years. We don't even know, where we'll be. So, yes, I think there probably might be a Lib Dem Labour coalition, but who knows? It's far too early to say.
Yeah, and certainly it's interesting with Reform UK because they are the most popular party in lots of votes, but they're also the most unpopular party, and Nigel Farage is someone who divides opinion, Maxwell.
Yeah, completely polarising, and I think that works, into the hands of the Liberal Democrats and Labour quite well. I think it's disastrous for the Conservatives, by the way, the fact he's so polarising, because people will just turn off from the right if they don't like Nigel Farage, so they may move to the Lib Dems, who I see as middle-class populists, actually. They're against everything and in favour of nothing. If it offends mainstream opinion, then they are fully against. I think that's a very interesting...
The pro-Gales bakeries being built.
Yeah,
they actually had a strategy to target constituencies where those expensive bakeries are, but I do love those bakeries, not just because I love baked products, but also because the chairman is Luke Johnson, who managed to seriously annoy Julian Maugham, the fox killer, who had a tweet against him, and I went straight out to Gales and bought some Gales over expensive product.
Well, I was voting with your pounds. I think that's great. I'm actually going to have my lunch from Gales, I've decided today, so
excellent.
It's a good move.
Obviously being paid too much.
I think so, yeah.
Must be it. Thank you both very much indeed. That's Maxwell Marlowe, or is it Steve Wright, or indeed Jacob Rees-Mogg, and James Bealby, political commentators both, and Maxwell works for the Adam Smith Institute as well, one of the think tanks in London in a senior role. Paul is in Spain and says it's all well and good Labour saying there are £150 off utility bills when they've gone up in excess of inflation over the last 18 months. Raising minimum wage means more businesses not expanding or even closing. Unemployment is up, inflation up, growth low, borrowing high. Where is this money to make the cost of living get better come from? Typical Labour, the sooner they go the better, says Paul in Spain. Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in the next hour. Of course, we're here right through until 12:30, and if you want to get your voice on the air, please do give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. What do you think of this tactical voting, the anyone but Nigel movement? We'll talk more about that. We'll talk about migration too. Stay with us here on Talk.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the Channel crossing as the dangerous bit, but actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants, and as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here right through until 12:30, and indeed all week doing Drive between 4 and 7. It's a big week for Talk because Jeremy Kyle is starting doing the breakfast show tomorrow at 6 o'clock. There's nowhere else you want to be. Tomorrow morning, the Jeremy Kyle breakfast show will be here, and Julia as well, back from her Christmas break. She'll be back at 10 o'clock. Let's talk about all the big issues of the day with you. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000, to get whatever is on the tip of your tongue onto our airwaves. We're talking about immigration in the second in France, threatening to arrest British people who stop the migrant crossings. Also, former border czar is saying mass migration is storing up future problems. We'll talk as well to a restaurant owner. They're closing down their restaurant because the rates are tripling. Business rates are tripling. That will happen from April, and there's so many problems that are in those many restaurants and bars. Many people, of course, working in them will lose their jobs. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're talking about Venezuela too, and Keir Starmer and his plan, his last-ditch effort really, to say that actually the cost of living crisis isn't that big a deal and things will start to be better. What do you think about all of that? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note. We'll have some of those in a minute. Less than a minute, please. 0344 499 1000. You can use that number to ring me or to send me a WhatsApp text message too. So much to discuss between now and 12:30. Stay with us here on Talk. So a bit later on, I'm going to talk to Natalie and Ben. They run a restaurant called Randall's. It was part of the Dolphin Hotel in Pembroke Dock in Wales. And it was actually a viewer, a guy called Spike, who sent me this. And you can do that too. You know, if there are stories you think we should be covering, just send me a message on Twitter. You can ring in and tell me a story you think we should be covering. Because really, this story about tripling business rates and the problems that so many small business owners are having, and those who are working for them, well, this is a serious issue. And I think it's been forgotten a lot. I don't think enough people are talking about it. And if there are things you think we should be talking about, as I say, just let me know. Sarah has been in touch about one of the things we're talking about this morning, about the fact that there is a festival, a music festival that has banned white people from running it. It's raked in thousands in taxpayers' cash. Sarah says it sounds like a blatant anti-British white people festival. Unbelievable. Imagine if white people said Palestinian people can't be involved in an anti-Palestinian festival in Palestine, now that Palestine seems to be the benchmark of everything in the world, says Sarah. And on that point, actually, about the problems that so many of our businesses are having, Jason has been in touch from the Lake District and says, I've been self-employed for 25 years next year. I work 7 days a week and I've never had less than I have now. Almost every cost of my business, my income, has significantly increased due to this lousy government, so that we can pay for a huge number of feckless and lazy people to continue not working. Your Labour-loving guest is deluded, talking about James Bealby there earlier on. Labour are not working. Well, what do you think about all of this? Also, what do you think about another story we're talking about today? Tactical voting could block Nigel Farage's path to number 10. Liberal, Democrat and Green voters could flock to Labour to prevent Nigel Farage entering Downing Street. This is something that Kelvin has been in touch about with a voice note. This is what Kelvin has to say.
Good morning, Peter. Of course, there's a conspiracy to keep Nigel Farage and the Reform Party out by the lefties. They're dirty guts, they have dirty tactics, they tell lies, they do nothing but lie. And I think the country, you'll see straight through all the lies they come out with, because that's all they do. Lie, lie, lie. You know, and the country's had enough of liars, so, yeah, there is a big conspiracy. And I think there's going to be a lot more to come, and I think the worst lies will come out soon. But hopefully people have common sense and see straight through it, because lefties support criminals. You've only got to look at the records of what the Labour Party have been doing, supporting, giving terrorists money, compensation and God knows what for rape, murder and everything else that they've done. So, yeah, there is a big conspiracy. Bye.
Thank you very much indeed, Calvin. James has been in touch about this punk festival. This is the music festival banning white people from running it, and it's got thousands in taxpayers' cash, your money, taxpayers' money from the Arts Council, and also lottery money as well. Let's hear what James has to say about that. And
Peter, it's James from Kent. Yes, this punk festival that receives government money, what particularly annoys me about that is that it received money during COVID to keep it alive, otherwise it would have gone bankrupt. Many festivals around the country died during COVID because of lack of support. Why did this lot get special dispensation and government money, taxpayers' money? Many thanks, bye.
I think those are very, very valid questions in all of this. Thank you, James, Kelvin and Jason. Everybody else who's been in touch, you can get in touch, 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now about France threatening to arrest British people who try to stop migrant crossings, activists slashing dinghies leaving for Dover. France considering arresting British nationals who try to stop migrant crossings. Several activists accused of slashing dinghies. The French Interior Minister Laurent Nunez has warned that any Brits interfering with the crossings could be arrested for possible obstruction and aggravated violence. He has supposedly stepped up efforts to stop such incidents following a number of vigilante-style actions by members of the Raise the Colours movement. Let's get a perspective on this from Tom Jones, who is the deputy online editor of The Critic. He's also author of the Potemkin Village Idiot Substack. Tom, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of this?
Well, it's absolutely astounding, isn't it? You know, the French are really able to crack into action when it's British people dealing with their failure to stop the boats, but are completely unable, it seems, to stop the boats in the first place. So last year, Macron pledged that elite police units would intervene at sea by intercepting the people smugglers' dinghies as they approach the beaches to come up to migrants. However, the strategy to tackle those taxi boats hasn't happened at all because of concerns from the French police union, who basically say it puts their members in too much danger. And so because of that, basically the new big agreement that we have with France has not taken off at all. And so as a result, you know, with the kind of spiralling small boats crisis, you are seeing more Britons take the law into their own hands, frankly.
I am not supporting people taking the law into their own hands. I'm not supporting people who don't follow the law. But it is my job to see all sides of the argument. And I can see all sides of the argument here. If we're paying the French £500 million a year to stop these people coming across, if the French at least once, probably for the cameras, can use a Stanley knife to puncture a dinghy as we saw in the months before Christmas, if they can do that and then they arrest people for doing the thing that they did perhaps only once, but certainly should be doing far more often to disable these boats from coming across. I don't want anybody to die, I don't want anybody to drown, I don't want anybody to be in mortal danger. Of course I don't. But there are far more steps the French could take, and actually that interview, indeed the documentary that Isabel Oakeshott, our international editor, fronted on all of this, the real truth that came out in that, shows that the French are doing very little. In fact, they're working against us time and time and time again when it comes to illegal migrants getting on boats.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely incontrovertible, frankly, Peter. And, you know, as you say, we've got to see all sides of the story on Talk. Frankly, you can't really blame them. We have insane pull factors into this country that mean migrants really, really, really want to come to this country. It's created a huge problem in France for the French authorities. And so the French are, to be fair, saying, well, you know, why would we become anything more than a transitory stop for these people? But of course, they shouldn't really be accepting our money to do something about it if they're not going to do something about it. And I think actually this Raise the Colours thing really ties into something that we've seen emerge over the last year, particularly the hotel protests, which is that people are now very, very, very tired of unwanted mass migration. They are outraged by the Channel boats. And because of the consistent failure of successive governments, first Labour, now the Conservatives, now Labour again, because of the failure of those successive governments to control the border, I think people are starting to take the law into their own hands, and we are going to end up, we are already, I would argue, in a very dangerous situation.
And I do not condone that, and I know you don't either, Tom, and we can't have people taking the law into their own hands. It would be really helpful if the French did what we pay them to do and what they are supposed to do, so people don't feel that is the action that they can take. They don't feel listened to, and I don't condone it at all, but I certainly understand it. I understand why they feel they have to take that course of action, not that I endorse it. Tom, can you tell us about this former border czar who says mass migration is storing up future problems?
Yes, absolutely. So this is the former, basically the highest ranking immigration official in the civil service who told a select committee in Parliament basically that migration is storing up problems for the future. Basically because of the changing fiscal profile of migration. The average low-earning migrant who moves to the UK age 25 now costs the government more overall than they contribute in tax from the moment they arrive. And the cost of the public purse will have risen to about £150,000 by the time they can claim the state pension. So this civil servant...
It's just absurd. It is just in no way sustainable, and there are so many people, you know, Jason messaging me earlier there, working 7 days a week, he's self-employed. People like him will feel like mugs because there are these people coming here costing us more than they contribute.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what this minister was arguing, that basically it's a very short-term fiscal gain that has huge down the line costs. And I've previously written about this. I've called it human quantitative easing. Basically, to avoid the government having to make difficult decisions about delivering growth, things like energy costs, which involves building, things about improving infrastructure. Basically, it pulls the lever that allows global workforce patterns to come to the UK and basically suppresses native wages. And that's not just in the private sector. We're increasingly seeing the government use that to suppress costs in the public sector. So obviously, social care was the one that was mentioned by this civil servant, but obviously, of course, the NHS and teaching, and particularly prisons, are now incredibly reliant on migrant labour.
And we've seen, I mean, I've spoken to Vanessa Freck, who's Reform UK's prisons justice actually advisor, and she's a former governor of a prison. She was telling me about the fact that they've had to import so many people, especially from Western Africa, to be prison officers. They just don't have those people, and actually if you raise the amount of money you need to stay in this country, well, those prison officers will have to leave. So how do you deal with that as well? It's a whole massive issue by itself. Tom, thank you for your insight this morning. That's Tom Jones there. He's Deputy Online Editor of The Critic. He's also author of the Potemkin Village Idiot Substack. I really appreciate him talking to us this morning, and thanks to everybody who's been in touch, particularly on this issue of tactical voting. This is the Liberal, Democrat and Green voters which could flock to Labour to prevent Nigel Farage from entering Downing Street polling for The Times is suggesting. Dean in East London says, morning Peter, there should be no surprise that lefties would use tactical voting to keep out Farage. After all, the lefties in France and Germany have done it in similar circumstances. They would live in the dark ages. They would rather live in the dark ages than admit their failed ideology of socialism has not and will never work, says Dean. Mary in Hemel Hempstead is on the line. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Mary, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about this?
I'd like to say that to me, these people either do not care about their country, or they're just looking out for themselves. This is gerrymandering, really, and is corruption.
Shouldn't people be allowed to vote for who they want to vote for, no matter who that is?
Yes, they're allowed to vote for who they want, but they vote for their party. They're not. If they're going to come together as one bloc, that is where it's gerrymandering. It's just false.
But if you're in a situation as a single voter, if you're in a situation where you're a massive Green Party supporter, and you see that you're in your particular constituency, it's between Labour and the Conservatives. You vote for the Green Party, they're not going to get in, doesn't matter, it's not going to matter. But it might come down to a few hundred votes. We've seen that people like Wes Streeting, for example, very small majority in his constituency, and people will go with the least worst option.
No, I'm sorry. To me, it's still corruption. If I'm a member of the Green Party, for example, I will want to vote for the Green Party. I won't want to vote for a coalition of other parties just in order to stop one party.
But isn't it a wasted vote, Mary?
Very much so. Can I say something as well about this French situation?
Of course you can. Go ahead.
Well, I wish the French would make up their minds. First of all, they blame us because the migrants, because we offer so many benefits, which we all know is true. Then they say they're going to stop the boats and they'll go in the water. Then they're saying they're not going to go in the water. Now they're going to the people who are going to maybe stop the boats, which would, in a way, help their country, because they must be sick of them going into their country to come here. So now they're going to target those people. Now, will they go in the water if they're going in the water to stash the boats? Will they tackle them out of the water? What are they going to do? And as far as I'm concerned, I hope more people do it. I don't care if it is vigilantism. I hope more people do it and more people stand up in the country generally for what we want.
I think all those points are perfectly valid, Mary, and thank you very much indeed for your call. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Mick in Wallington. He says, I think the British people should apply for an arrest warrant for Macron due to the blatant fraud over payments to stop migrants. Starmer does not have the guts, unlike Trump. Gary says tactical voting will be a huge factor in the next general election, but I actually think that makes it more likely that we will get a right-of-centre coalition government, because it will force Reform UK into an official alliance with the Conservatives fielding just one candidate in each seat. And trust me, it's going to be far easier for those two parties to successfully work together than it is going to be through the supporters of Labour, the Greens, the Lib Dems, the SNP, Plaid Cymru, your party and Uncle Tom Cobley and all to swing in behind one candidate in each seat. Gary, that is an interesting thought in all of that. I'm not sure I entirely agree with it, but it has made me think, and I will think over it over the next few minutes. And one thing we're also going to be thinking about is men and talking about your problems. This is a really interesting thing I was reading earlier today. We've been told time and time again, share your problems. Sharing your problems is a really good thing. Tell people about them. But actually, there's now an anthropological study by a professor who says that actually this is not a good thing, and men can come together, can do things, can certainly take part in activities and hobbies and stuff together, but actually talking about hobbies and talking about their problems isn't the best way. There's also a thing about banter as well. Essentially, the more someone slags you off, essentially, the more they like you. I've certainly experienced that myself on many occasions, or maybe those people actually just don't like me. That's part of it. So we'll talk about all of that in just a few minutes here on Talk.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now then, should men open up about what they think, what their emotions are, how they communicate is an interesting aspect. We talk about mental health from time to time. On this programme, we know that suicide amongst men is a major problem. But men opening up, quiet friendship is better for some, according to a study by an anthropologist who's found solace in reticence. He is talking about how male friendship thrives. Thomas Yarrow went through a difficult time himself as marriage broke down. He was aware of the advice given to all men at such moments, that it's essential for your mental health to open up to friends, to talk about your feelings, to express your emotions. But he spent lots of time instead with people who didn't talk very much at all. And when they did, they talked mostly about welding, axles and engine parts, because he joined a steam railway group as part of his research into UK's heritage culture. But he said it became a bit of a sanctuary where men really didn't talk about their opinions and their emotions particularly. Lucy Beresford is a psychotherapist and broadcaster and joins me now on this. Lucy, this is a bit of an outlier in terms of the studies around this. Happy New Year to you. You're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of this?
Well, it's not that much of an outlier because there is generally received wisdom that women and men process emotions differently. And in particular, women, for example, release the feel-good hormone of oxytocin when they communicate with other women in a sort of reciprocity way, when you've got one person talking about their experiences and then another person sharing their experiences, and that it's almost like grooming. You can visualize monkeys sort of stroking each other's fur, and that is the process that it is felt women go through when they're sharing their emotions, and that's very different for men. But what a lot of research has shown lately is that if you have a vocabulary for your emotions, you can be better equipped to process those emotions. And what this report from Mr. Yarrow really, in a way, highlights is a misunderstanding of what we mean when we say, get in touch with your feelings. It isn't about telling everybody how you feel and then imagining that means everything will get better. First of all, you have to communicate with people who are prepared to listen, and many of your friends might not be prepared to listen, which is frankly how I end up having the job that I do have. But secondly, if you don't have the vocabulary to talk about what's happening for you, then you can't really process it. And I think that what this man experienced was the therapeutic benefit of a community where he was absorbed and accepted and welcomed in, and that was the most transformative thing for him, not the fact that nobody was talking about their feelings.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I wonder if it comes down to the fact that, and you talk about women sharing their problems, some people want to share their problems simply to talk about their problems, and that's kind of their way of getting through it. Also, there are many people who say, right, what's the solution here? What do I do to fix this? And that, to me, and you're the professional, that to me is a more male approach than a female approach, to say, here's a problem, fix it. Whereas often, in my experience, women like to do exactly what you've just described.
Well, you are summarising the entire thesis of a very famous book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, which is very much about the idea that women want to go through an experience by talking about it and processing the emotion, and the man stereotypically wants to find a solution. And the problem for that is if you are in a heteronormative relationship. Mr. Yarrow's experience talks about how therapeutic it was to hang out with a bunch of other men, but what he doesn't address is how men and women communicate, particularly if they're in an intimate relationship, and the problems that can arise because the men and the women are speaking, in effect, a different language. And many relationships are about how do you navigate the differences in communication style, neither of which we would label as wrong, but it's just a different communication style. You're speaking French, I'm speaking German, we can't really understand each other. How do we navigate that? That's really what that's talking about. But again, I also think that it might be a generational thing, because emotional literacy is something that we are woefully underprepared for as we grow up, and we're meant to arrive at adulthood very alert for our feelings and how to communicate about them, and communicate about them to ourselves as well. It's very important.
And receive as well as transmit. I mean, there are a lot of people, I feel, under-equipped. If someone comes to you with a problem, to deal with that. There are loads of people in the business I often criticise of HR who just have absolutely no compassion because they don't have the facility to deal with other people, and obviously their loyalties to the business. There are lots of people who hear things, or alternatively are given a big problem in their life. Suddenly, right, you know, you're someone in your family, God forbid, has cancer. Deal with that. Okay, you must be in touch with your emotions. Well, actually, or you're given a piece of information about someone in your family who's, I don't know, gay or something, and you just don't know how to deal with that. because you've never had to before, and you're 25 or whatever, and you've suddenly got to simply have these emotional skills that you may not have learned at all?
I think the school curriculum needs a radical overhaul because it needs to include an awareness of how to regulate your own emotions. Meditation is brilliant for that. Tapping, emotional freedom techniques, things that I've talked to you about in the past, skills that you can give children to help them navigate their own emotional weather vane, if you like, because none of us can live on this permanent upward trajectory. We have to navigate the bad hair days and the days that last longer than the bad hair days, that actually there will be things that we have to address and deal with. But a lot of my work is about listening. It's not about talking, it's not about fixing, it's not about trying to provide solutions. The most important thing to remember about a crisis or about a trauma is that a lot of people come to therapy not because they don't know what to do. They come to therapy because they know exactly what they need to do, but they're absolutely terrified, and all they want is someone to really hold them in that distress, to help them contain that distress. And I go back to this report from Mr. Yarrow. I think what he was experiencing was the containment that was provided by this amazing group of men who were, lots of different ages and backgrounds, and they all came together because they had this shared love of this one thing. But they were able to contain each other's distress. And if you don't have that in your life, that's when problems can seem overwhelming or insurmountable. So it's less about the style of support that you might get from your community or your friends or your family, and it's more about, does it work for you as an individual?
Well, let's talk about that just finally, actually, because there more in this piece from that Thomas Yarrow is involved with, this professor who did this study. He talked about banter. He talked about slagging people off and having, nicknames that some people might think are a bit cruel, or, pointing out something about someone that is not particularly the nicest thing in the world, actually being a sign of affection in itself. Almost the more you criticise someone, the more you like them. Is that a particularly male thing? Is that a particularly British thing?
It is widely thought that it is more masculine, and again the thesis around that tends to be that it acts as a way of being intimate without being intimate. If there is that stereotype that men in particular worry that if they reveal their feelings that they will open themselves up to vulnerability and the agony that can give rise to for many men, that actually the banter shows you, I like you, I rate you, I have welcomed you into my tribe, but I don't want to get too close. So much not necessarily a British thing. And I say again, the problem with that is if you're in a relationship with someone and they could be male, they could be female, and they don't speak that same language as you. You need to be able to communicate what you're communicating.
I once worked with a very famous broadcaster and I was told, if this person, if he banters with you and slags you off and says these things, it means he really likes you. There was one particularly offensive email, which was about 6 words long, that he sent me about 3 months into our working relationship. I showed it to my line manager and went, yeah, well done. Yeah, that's great. He really likes you. Yeah, no, he's called you those names. Fantastic. That's progress. So Lucy, thank you very much indeed. Lucy Beresford, who has never had a bad hair day. Lustrous locks there, psychotherapist and broadcaster Lucy Beresford. Anne in Sussex has some thoughts on this. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Anne, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you. I wish I was an expert, but I'm not. But what I would like to say is, when we say about men and men's support and health, there's no one simple answer that would suit for all men. Single men, and we've had sadly, I've had too many suicides around here of young men, is a very vulnerable area. How much can a young man admit that they are struggling? And even if they go to the psychiatric services, they have failed them. The ones that I've been involved with who've sadly taken their life, and I've heard what they've been through. And then there's the young men and middle-aged men, who are married with children, and they are all working very hard, not those on benefits, but those who are working hard. They are then the new men, they've got to be brilliant in the home.
Yeah.
Their wives are working. They've got to be pulled in all directions, which I think your parents, your grandparents would say, actually, it was different for us.
It certainly was. There's no doubt about that. And there is a lot of pressure. It's maybe not more or less pressure. It's just very different pressure on what is expected of men these days.
Yes, but if you were doing a very physical, exhausting, demanding job, you would come home and your wife would have your meal ready and look after you. Yeah. Today, and I know because my sons are all good cooks and my son-in-laws, they're doing the lot. And they are often now, another area is that if you work in offices and IT, I have a relative who American hours are different from ours, so they're never off their phones, their laptops.
Yeah.
The pressures are enormous on both sexes, but we've really got to identify how we can best help men. And I'm a bit perturbed by what you said, that if they're rude to you, they like you. What a cop-out for that ignorant person.
I don't think so, actually. I got on with that person very, very well.
Oh, you're lucky then.
Sorry, Anne, you're just breaking up there. Say that again, please.
In a way, if you have been through being treated badly in the past and somebody comes along and thinks they are joking, they don't know that they're tapping into something.
Yeah, that can be true too. You're absolutely right, Anne. Wise words there from Anne in Sussex. Thank you for those. I appreciate that. And if you've been affected by any of the issues that we're talking about during this discussion, we'll continue talking about this because I think there are quite a few people who want to get on it and messages coming through and so on. And please do give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. But if you have been affected by any of the issues, you can go to talk.tv/helplines, and there's lots of information there of various bodies you can discuss those things with. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Brad in Cambridge says, I have a very small group of male friends and we are very close. We genuinely like and care for each other and we simply thrive on banter. Sadly, I feel that banter is a dying art, says Brad in Cambridge. Wendy says, all of my friends are men. They talk factually and objectively. They say what they mean with no undercurrent or hidden meaning. Feelings are self-indulgent, temporary and are best ignored. Cliff in Berkshire says, I wonder if men are suffering more now. That might be down to imposed changes in the way we see masculinity. Growing up in the middle of the last century, I was told not to show a weakness and males don't cry. It does take a lot of courage to show your weakness and expose your soft underbelly, says Cliff in Berkshire. And believe me, I have a very soft underbelly. Penny in Essex says, my husband, a stiff upper-lipped Yorkshireman who will never talk about any problems to do with himself, especially health. I noticed something that got him to have a PSA blood test, despite him telling me I was daft. I saved his life from prostate cancer, which had just started. He is now prostate cancer free. Penny, I'm delighted to hear that. Will you men please get PSA tested and discuss things, says Penny. What do you think about this? We started a bit of a debate here, and whatever you think, let me know. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be talking about a big aspect of the economy in a minute, which I think a lot of people are just not talking about. And on my shows, we try to talk about what you want to talk about because of your show as well as my show, but also the reality, the practicality. Keir Starmer says, cost of living crisis is getting better, all is well. Well, ask Natalie Newton and Ben Randall. They're the owners of Randall's, a restaurant that was part of a hotel in Pembroke Dock in Wales. It has had to close down. They've put a heartbreaking series of messages on Facebook that were sent to me by a viewer. Now we've got Natalie and Ben, and we're going to speak to them in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile. mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, and we will return to that issue of how men express themselves, how they're feeling, certainly very, very soon. But I want to talk about a popular restaurant in Wales that is shut because rates have more than tripled. This is Randall's. It was part of the Dolphin Hotel in Pembroke Dock. It served its final meal on Christmas Day. And I'm going to talk to the owners now, Natalie and Ben, who are with me. Ben Randall and Natalie Newton. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so sorry to hear about your restaurant. And I wonder if you could just tell me why you've decided to close down, because I think there are an awful lot of factors that so many people just don't get, don't understand, especially when it comes to business rates tripling as they have in your case. Natalie, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, basically the profit margins to run a restaurant are spread really thin as it is. I mean, most restaurants' profit after net profit is can be from 3 to 6%. And with all the hikes that have come in over the last couple of years, the utility bills, all the extra things, suppliers, it just has a knock-on effect. The wages have gone up, national insurance has gone up, it's going to go up to 15%. And now where they've hit us with this, I just don't see that it's viable to stay open and run a successful restaurant anymore. So your rates would have been £5,020 a year, and they would, in theory, go up to in April to £16,566. I mean, that is more than £11,000 raise simply in one aspect of this. But Ben, maybe you can tell me a little bit about the other costs that have gone up too, because I hear this a lot about so many businesses that are trying to provide a service, nice restaurant, nice food. You employed 11 people and you've had to make this decision.
Yeah, everything's gone up. From staff wages will go up. I know that's good for staff, but it's not good for a small business. Waste collection has gone up. Electricity, gas, our butcher's bills, our meat, all supplier bills have gone up.
Yeah.
So
everything just has a knock-on effect.
Yeah, profit margins have shrunk.
I want to put something to you. The Prime Minister is out at the moment talking about the cost of living crisis. He says he's going to make a pledge to families. He's going to say that 2026 is the year they feel real change from action taken by the government, while promising to use every tool to make the lives of Brits better. I just want to read you something that he has said, or is going to say apparently. This Labour government is on your side, doing everything we can to ease the cost of living and make life better. In 2026, the choices we made will mean more people begin to feel that positive change. Natalie and Ben, what would you say to the Prime Minister when you think about those sentiments and what he said there?
It's obviously not true, because I know we're not the only one. Literally over the last 2 weeks, I've been seeing online other restaurants, other pubs, all saying about they're going to have to close the doors for good. It's not true. Where is our help?
It's not any easier for those staff that have all been let go.
No.
And I want to ask about them actually, because you've been in the very, very difficult position of having to let those people go. I'm sure, I've lost my job a number of times in my career, lost it 3 times before I was 30. I know what it's like, and I know the range of emotions you go through. But you as well, you didn't want to do this. You didn't want to make this decision. Yeah. This is tricky for you too, Ben, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we're all like family. We adore all of our staff, and they were so loyal. We obviously told them before Christmas that we were going to close, and they still wanted to see through to the last shift. Everyone was so upset. We're all upset. We just like one big family. We look after each other, and this has always been a happy place to work, and everyone is devastated. What are they going to do now? Because we keep hearing, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, says, oh no, these rises in national insurance, one of the first things you guys mentioned quite rightly, no, that hasn't led to unemployment. Well, there are 11 people who have been made unemployed as an almost direct result of that. What do they do now? What are they telling you about that, Ben?
Well, for a start, they'll have to go and find new jobs. We're keeping 2 on to run our hotel.
Because you have another part of your business.
Yeah, well, we've basically had to stop saving to the public because our rates actually went from 10,000 to 33. So, you know, we've kept 2 staff to run a hotel, but we're just going to run it as a hotel purely and save our hotel guests food.
And it doesn't make sense really, because they're trying to squeeze £33,000 out of us for a year. If those 11 employees seek benefits for 12 months, it could cost the government, the minimum it will cost the government would be 66,000, depending, and if they were on a different set of benefits, it could cost the government up to 100,000 a year. So it
do you think the government gets this, Natalie? Do you think they understand the lives of people like you? You're honest people, working hard, trying to make honest money, paying your taxes, employing those 11 people until recently. Do they get this, Natalie?
No.
No.
They could have come to our hotel and had a look at our profit margins and then maybe give a more realistic amount that we could afford to keep the business running. But they just slapped a 3 times the amount bill on us, and that's without poll tax going up this year again. You know,
where do they get the calculations from? It doesn't.
We're not in a holiday area. We rely on our locals to keep this restaurant going. We don't have passers-by and things like that. We don't get, you know, like people just walking in. Generally, it's booked tables.
On that note, and just before you go, Ben, maybe Natalie could do this. You're on national TV. Tell us about your hotel. Tell us how you get there. Tell us how you book there, because I want the hotel side of your business to survive and thrive. Give us the detail. Here's your free plug. Go for it, Natalie.
Oh, thank you. So we're located in the heart of Pembroke Dock. We are the closest hotel to catch the Irish ferries, which we're 5-minute hub away. We're very close to Tenby. We're a cheaper option for Tenby. Yeah. You know, we do an amazing breakfast. All the locals will tell you that. We have comfortable budget rooms to suit, or we have more luxurious rooms. There's something here for everyone.
And what's your website, so people will book with you?
It is Dolphin Hotel Restaurant in Pembroke Dock.
Lovely. People can Google that and have a look. That is the Dolphin Hotel in Pembroke Dock, and its owners there, Natalie Newton and Ben Randall. Thank you to them. Well, listening to that is Michael Kill from the Nighttime Industries Association. He's their chief executive. We spoke, it was actually, you inspired me, Michael, because we spoke the other day about this, and then on the back of what you said to me, a guy in Wales, not a million miles away from these guys actually, got in touch with their Facebook posts about this. And I want to kind of circle back and complete the conversation essentially with you, Michael, because this is all too normal, all too frequent. And they're saying, you're saying, and I'm saying, the government doesn't get this. Even the basic mathematics of 11 people getting unemployment benefits is far, far more than having those rises in rates, for example, those business rates.
Look, for us, it just is a surreal position. It's almost like the Chancellor and the team behind the Chancellor are just disconnected from the reality of business, or have never really run a business before. You know, it's heartbreaking to hear about the restaurant and that exact case study, but there are thousands of case studies, restaurants, pubs, bars, clubs, even theatres that are going through the same process. And, you know, this situation with the business rates reform, which was built up to be this big sort of saviour or drive forward that would make a difference, has really ended up being an Achilles heel. And many of these businesses are seeing, on average, 76% increase, but overall, we're seeing 200% to 300% increase in business rates. That on top of NIC, on top of the operating cost increases, minimum wage, alcohol duty. I mean, we're sort of tentatively suggesting that about 7 out of 10 businesses are either barely breaking even or losing money now. And come January, when VAT and landlords are expecting their rent there is going to be a huge concern that exactly what the future looks like. So they're going to make some difficult decisions.
This is a vicious circle. I have a lovely pub near me. I sometimes do a pub quiz in it, and every time I pass it, I just think, how much longer are you going to be here? You know, I look in, I see there often aren't people there. And actually, from the perspective of people who want to help, people who want to go to pubs and clubs and restaurants and bars and so on, for every reason that you've very reasonably set out there, as of Natalie and Ben, the prices are going up and people are dealing with their own cost of living crisis and thinking, right, I might have gone to the pub twice a week, I'm now going to go once a week and maybe even drink less when I'm there. And people want to, our viewers and listeners, I know, want to support people like Natalie and Ben. They want to support the kind of places that you represent, Michael, but they're also facing their own problems. What would you say to them?
I think the challenge that we have is a balance. We're asking people to come out to support, but fundamentally this sits within the government's gift. They have got to readdress the NIC contribution position for employers. That has cost businesses, individual businesses, between 30 and 80k a year on average. That's on top of the 30 to 40% increase in operating costs since 2020, and then we talk about all the other things, business rates, etc. So it's within the government's gift. That's the only way that this can be resolved. And we are asking very clearly for a reversal of the NIC. We're asking for a VAT cut down to 13%, which would make a difference and correlate with Europe in particular, and make everyone give everyone the opportunity to have some financial headroom to give back. You quite rightly say these jobs that are lost are going to go and possibly seek benefits or go outside. We're losing that talent. And, what's the point in going out and suggesting that we're going to get young people back in work where we already had them in work and all we've done is created policies and economic climate that have driven us to take them out of work? It just seems very surreal.
I cannot disagree with a single word you say, Michael. Thank you very much. This is Michael Kildare from the Nighttime Industries Association. He's its chief executive. And thanks also to Natalie Newton and Ben Randall, the hotel, lovely part of the world actually, that they're in, the Dolphin Hotel in Pembroke Dock. And as I say, Tenby is just up the road, which is a lovely part of the world as well. Mark in London says the majority of restaurant owners are fair and working within the law. They will feel. The restaurants working in the grey zone will thrive. Is this what Starmer wants? What is his end game, says Mark. And thank you to this anonymous text who says, I'm an older lady. I do not recall anything like this back in the day, i.e. in the 1970s until now. I think this troubled country has had a huge impact on all of us. I myself, of strong character, I'm feeling like I need to escape to where I don't know, but I don't want to start my retirement living in this depressing country where we, the indigenous population, are treated like second-class citizens. I can't take any more of feeling such anger. That is real frustration right there at the way this country is going. What I would say is, if you want to ventilate that, if you want to talk to me about it, if you want to give me your points, if you want to talk about how we solve this, well, give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. You can ring me, you can send me a voice note on that number. I'll get as many of voices on the air that aren't mine between now and 12:30. Stay with us.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. I promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. Jeremy Carr Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch. We're going to go on a bit of a voice note-a-thon now. Let's hear from Jay on Donald Trump.
Morning guys, fantastic show as always. I just want to point out, do you think Donald Trump would allow the British-hating Egyptian to be sent back to the UK, or Shamina Begum? No, he wouldn't. They would not. They'd get their visas terminated straight away. That's a leader protecting their people. The left will tell you he's racist, he's this, he's that. No, he's just protecting his people. You know, he's doing a job of protecting his people. But what I just want to point out as well is with the Venezuela snatch and grab on the president, all the threats the president made, you try, see what you get, and all this to Trump. And then Trump just sent his boys in, Delta Force. Notice the way that the anti-aircraft Chinese latest technology didn't even do anything. Got blown out the ground. So that shows with Iran and Venezuela how good their technology is, doesn't it?
Very interesting thoughts there from you, and thanks for that. And Alaa Abdul Al Fattah should never have been given British citizenship in the first place. Totally agree with you, Jay. Really, really interesting voice note there. Let's hear what Deborah has to say about tactical voting, because there is polling to suggest that loads of people would, who are mainly Green and your party and Liberal Democrats, would vote Labour to keep Farage out. This is what Deborah thinks.
Hello, Peter. Deborah here from Essex. Tactical voting. Please don't underestimate the British people, the electorates, who can also use tactical voting in the ways they know best. Have a good day.
Thanks, Deborah. We will make sure that they are not to be underestimated. You're absolutely right to make that point. David's been in touch about Starmer waiting for the call from Trump.
Hi, Peter. Great show. So Starmer's waiting for a phone call from Trump about the Maduro capture. Well, there's more chance of getting a phone call from Santa Claus or speaking to the fairies at the end of his garden. Trump thinks Starmer and the UK is irrelevant, period. As for Labour making things better, you could have a living wage of £10,000 a month if the national insurance makes it impossible to employ anybody and business rates makes it impossible to open a business, there'll be no employment. Labour don't understand that.
Very, very good points there, David. Thank you. And I do think Starmer will speak to Trump at some point, but I think it'll be very much receive rather than transmit. And what's going to happen if Keir Starmer says, oh, you know, I think you've broken international law? What's Trump going to say? I don't care who are you again. You know, I just do think that Trump will do what he wants to do. He always has. He always will. And, you know, the British rule, he was very keen to point out to Starmer that we had no rule in this. I don't think anybody suggested that we had. But there does pose a few problems for the government as well. And listen, I do think it is always worth having a phone call, or indeed writing to Father Christmas. I did when I was 7, asking him for a briefcase, and one did arrive. I was quite a sad child, as you can suggest and imagine. Bridget's been in touch on Starmer.
Good morning, Peter. Great show. It's Bridget in France here. Regarding Starmer cutting the cost of living, I don't believe a word of it, Peter. If he really wanted to do that, he would have cut the welfare bill. And look what happened there when they tried that. Also, now they're saying they're going to build council houses and get these migrants out of hotels. I mean, have they heard about the abuse staff are getting in hotels, food being thrown at them? They're not happy with their accommodation if they have to share. What will they expect from new council houses? I mean, the bill will go up and up and up because they will give in to them, and these houses should be built for the British people. But that's not the socialist way. Anyway, have a good day, Peter. Bye for now.
Bridget, thank you for that. That's Bridget in France there, although I suspect she may have some sort of connection to the Emerald Isle. Daniel has been in touch as well about Reform UK.
Hi, Peter. It's Daniel from Epsom here. When Reform win the next general election, they're going to win the Welsh Senedd in Wales and most of the locals. But when they win, I think the difficulty is going to be deporting millions and millions of people from Britain. I think that's going to be the hardest thing for any government to do, but I think it's necessary. It's really obvious there are 73 million people trying to use an infrastructure fit for 50 million. Nothing works. We need mass deportations, I think.
Thank you for that, Daniel. Mark has been in touch on tactical voting.
Morning, Peter. Mark in Lincolnshire. Just regarding tactical voting and stuff, yeah, I mean, I'm going to be voting reform. I have zero faith in what they're going to do. They're nowhere near hardline enough for immigration and stuff like that, as far as I'm concerned. But they're a stopgap. They'll last about 2 years. They'll be, you know, basically collapse. They'll have to leave. People will be so desperate they'll vote for an actual hard right party that takes no prisoners on immigration and stuff. You know, I think the left are going to do it. We should do it till we can get a hard right party that actually solves some of the problems that we've got. Cheers.
Mark, thank you. That's Mark in Lincolnshire there. He's talking about tactically voting for Reform UK. Interesting one. Teresa's been in touch too and says, "Hi Peter, I had tears in my eyes watching your interview with Ben and Natalie. This government is breaking the spirit of this beautiful country. Will they ever wake up? I fear not. Have a sane new year, Peter. Best wishes from Teresa." Well, listen, thank you for that. And Natalie and Ben, I think, spoke for so many people. They're a case study, yeah, but they're a case study because there are so many people that this is happening to. And thanks again to Spike for sending that in. He is a person who lives not a million miles away from Natalie and Ben, sending me that story and saying that we should cover it. And if there are things you think we should cover, you just let me know. You give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. We'll talk more about the tactical voting that could block Nigel Farage's path to number 10 and what you think about that too. There's an awful lot more to discuss between now and 12:30. So keep ringing, keep sending me your voice notes as well. We'll play those out too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Of course, you can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. We'll talk about Reform UK in a minute and the fact that there's polling to suggest that many people would consider tactically voting, people on the left, to keep Nigel Farage from 10 Downing Street. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. Plenty of people getting in touch as well, not just about Venezuela, but also men's mental health. That's something we've talked about, and whether people should actually not talk about their feelings. There's a very interesting article in the Sunday Times about that today. We're talking as well about the festival that's received taxpayers' cash, but it says that white people cannot be on its board. We'll talk about that before 12:30 as well. Loads to discuss. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me your thoughts on 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, less than a minute please, and we'll play those out on the main number. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number, or give me a ring on the main number, which is of course 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss in the next half an hour here on Talk. Well, I want to talk about the position of the Prime Minister and in relation to Reform UK. Let me just play you a couple of clips that we have been broadcasting this morning. Keir Starmer asked by the BBC, will he be Prime Minister this time next year? This is what he said.
Laura, under the last government, we saw constant chopping and changing of leadership, of teams. It caused utter chaos, and it's amongst the reasons that the Tories were booted out so effectively at the last election. Nobody wants to go back to that. It's not in our national interest. We know from that evidence what happens if you go down that chaotic path. I will be sitting in this seat by 2027, and if this long-form interview works, we can try it again in January of next year as well.
Keir Starmer there speaking to the BBC. Priti Patel, who is the Shadow Foreign Secretary, she was Home Secretary of course, talking a little bit about Venezuela, but more generally about Keir Starmer as well, spoke to Mark Dolan a little bit earlier on this station. This is what she had to say on that.
Priti Patel, what does it say about the UK's diplomatic standing that our Prime Minister wasn't consulted about these actions?
Well, you won't be surprised by my own view. I think Keir Starmer is incredibly weak, and I do not think he is strong enough on the international stage. And, you know, we speak about the special relationship with America. We're Five Eyes countries. As I said, you know, I've got a lot of history working with America on security and intelligence operations previously. I just don't think America looks to the United Kingdom in the way in which it once did.
Priti Patel was also asked by Mark Dolan about legal migration and whether she had regrets on that.
Do you regret the scale of legal and illegal immigration that played out whilst you were Home Secretary?
Of course, and that is why we have been very clear now, and you've asked about our direction of travel, why we have set out incredibly strong policies that involve some very big policy actions, such as leaving the ECHR. So I noticed before I came on your programme, you had a column down your screen about migrants coming to the country. If I may say, that should be illegal migrants. Yeah. I'm also the only Home Secretary that has used that term, illegal migrants, because the left and Labour now in government, they want to normalise all of this stuff, and it's not about normalising that. We don't have a deterrent in our country. You know my policies and my approach around a deterrent. We're talking about leaving the ECHR, leaving the ECAT, which actually enables far too many of these spurious cases to come to immigration courts and tribunals.
So there's a lot around this morning about the position of the Prime Minister, about our domestic politics, internationally as well. We've talked about that a lot during the show. I want to talk about Nigel Farage as well. He yesterday on Venezuela tweeted that the American actions in Venezuela overnight are unorthodox and contrary to international law in his view, but if they make China and Russia think twice, it may be a good thing. I hope Venezuelan people can now turn a new leaf without Maduro. Well, we know that Nigel Farage's party, Reform UK, has been ahead in the polls, in over 100 polls actually, for most of 2025. Now we're in 2026. There's been another poll that has been done by YouGov, the big polling organisation, saying that Liberal, Democrat and Green voters would flock back to Labour to prevent Nigel Farage from entering Downing Street at the next election. It found that more than half of those people polled, 57% of all Liberal Democrat voters, 46% of Green voters, would give up their first preference and back Labour if they're in a seat where Reform UK looked likely to win. It's interesting hearing what Barry has texted me about this, saying tactical voters obviously have no affection for this country and will be responsible for its terminal decline. I wonder if Lord Harewood agrees. He is a Conservative member of the House of Lords, but more important than that for this conversation, he is a very, very well regarded pollster. Robert, thank you for joining me today. Tell me what you think of this poll by YouGov.
Good afternoon, Peter. As far as I'm concerned, the suggestion that people are going to flock in one direction or another is highly questionable. You have to convince a voter that their first choice, whatever that might happen to be, is not the choice that they want to opt for because of a threat from another party. Tactical voting has not worked very effectively in the vast majority of circumstances, with the exception of where Liberal Democrats have clearly got themselves in the minds of everybody as second place in a constituency against the Conservatives. But it's a very, very difficult task. And are you saying, it's all very well people saying in answer to a question to a pollster on a laptop or whatever, that yes, they would consider voting for a party to stop another party. But it's a very different matter going into a polling booth, confronted with a ballot paper, and then saying, well, actually, I really can't stand Keir Starmer, I can't stand the Labour Party, they've achieved nothing, so I'm actually still going to vote for them because I think I might be stopping reform, depending on what the figures show. Very questionable, fascinating, but questionable in terms of its detail.
It's interesting you mentioned the Liberal Democrats. They're no stranger to a slightly dodgy bar chart where they point out in their literature that only the Liberal Democrats can stop the Tories or stop Labour or whatever it is in those different constituencies. Have there been examples from the past where tactical voting has made a big difference and evidence to suggest that people have done it? I think perhaps the most recent example I can think of is Caerphilly on the Plaid Cymru doing well there for in the Welsh Assembly election. But also when you look at individual politicians, people like Wes Streeting, for example, who had quite a big threat from an Islamist candidate, he would argue that, of course, people love him and think he's a wonderful MP, but with a small majority, and some of these quite senior figures sometimes with quite small majorities, I do wonder whether people will think twice, not just about their personal voting instincts, but also whether they vote tactically. I've certainly voted tactically in Northern Ireland. I'm very happy to say that I voted for the SDLP, for example, a nationalist party that I have no real affiliation with, but it was a very straightforward choice between them and their constitutional nationalists who believe in peace and Sinn Féin in the constituency I lived in the time.
Yeah, there are specific examples, but it depends on the circumstances. And there's no question that, for example, if you look at some of the results when the Lib Dems were in their heyday in Cornwall and Devon, they were able to squeeze the Labour voters to an extreme extent to support the Lib Dems. But that's very different from saying to somebody who is in Ilford, where Wes Streeting is the MP, vote for me now, despite everything that the government has done over the last few years, which you may not like. We have a position whereby the Prime Minister is the least popular Prime Minister of all time, where the government's ratings overall are utterly appalling. And to suggest under those circumstances that people will go from the Lib Dems back to the Labour Party, and I do use the word back to the Labour Party deliberately, or to the Greens, it is highly questionable, and clearly it will depend what the circumstances are of a general election, and we'll have to wait and see.
We've got a big change in the voting system in Wales. Just in layman's terms, could you perhaps explain that to us in terms of what's going to happen, how it's going to work, or perhaps not work? And similar, sorry, Robert, I'm putting you on the spot here, but similarly, what outcome there could be, because some people are saying maybe Plaid Cymru become the largest party, maybe Reform UK become the largest party, certainly Labour under a lot of pressure, and they've been in power every single day of devolution in Wales in the last quarter of a century plus.
Yes, can I start by going contrary to what I have been saying, and that's in Scotland, where there is some evidence of tactical voting at local elections, and that's because they have a very different voting system where you list candidates all the way down the ballot paper if you so choose. Now, in Wales in May, they are changing the voting system. They're going away from first past the post. They're merging constituencies, and they're using, and I will use the simplistic description of a top-up. So they'll look at what the overall numbers of votes in an area were and then top it up so that there's some rough proportionality about it. And they are also, big change, giving votes to 16 and 17-year-olds. So it is a very, very substantial difference in terms of the basis from the Senedd elections in 2021 to the ones that we're going to see in 2026. But it is not particularly conducive to encouraging tactical voting in the way that the Scottish system does, much less so in Wales than the Scottish local system does.
Robert, your face was a picture there when I said, can you just break this down for us? Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Robert Hayward there, Lord Hayward, who's a Conservative and a Conservative peer, member of the House of Lords, and a very renowned pollster as well. So psophologist is the technical term. Betty's been in touch. Says, Peter, ignore the polls. I left YouGov as was clear I was not being selected for political polls due to my demographic, and reply, look at the US. The more the left get rid of our money and call us right-wing, the more we will silently vote for change, says Betty. Rob has sent in a voice note on this. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hello, Peter. It's Rob here in Starbridge, mate. Pete, regarding tactical voting and the far left and the racist parties, they've got to be careful because, yeah, they can say, oh, well, we'll club together and we'll be, we'll join together in the next election or whatever. But they've got to be careful for the independent parties. Because if you look at it, most of the Labour seats are either close to Reform or close to being overtaken by independent parties. So yeah, let them join in, let the far left and the racists all join in together, but Reform will still come out on top. Because common sense always rises to the top, mate. It's like cream. The cream always rises to the top. Bye-bye.
Nick has been in touch about tactical voting too with a voice note. This is what Nick says.
Hi, Peter. It's Nick from Mansfield. Talking about the tactical voting from those on the left. Well, it's not really surprising. I mean, let's face it, a lot of those people on the left run on hatred. They rely on hatred. They hate the UK, they hate the working class, they hate British people. So they'll do anything to try and destroy that. Cheers.
Thank you to Max in Somerset, who says, I have sensible friends, he says in inverted commas, and family who believe all the spiel that comes forth from the BBC, The Guardian, The Mirror, The Independent, and who are upset by the Labour Party but will be voting Greens or SDP even if they unite with Labour, as they're so anti-reform they have their heads in the Sahara, in Max's opinion. Max in Somerset there. Plenty more on this and anything else you want to talk about between now and 12:30. Give me a shout, 0344 499 1000, and stay with us here on Talk.
brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Dave's been in touch and says, hi Peter, Happy New Year. Thank you, Dave, to you as well in Kent there. Was heartbreaking to hear from Natalie and Ben, says Dave. The government have created a perfect storm for them by increasing the business cost of the Dolphin Hotel, whose only hope of survival is for customers who have had their disposable incomes diminished due to the cost of living rises, come out and spend money which they now do not have. One more point, if I may. It was interesting to hear the discussion about males with mental health issues being discussed at the same time as we allow tens of thousands of young men being allowed into the country. Great show as always, says Dave in Kent. Thank you for that, Dave, and really good points there. On tactical voting, Mark in Glasgow has been in touch. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good morning. Well, I think what's going on at the moment, as we know and your station has highlighted, and almost the entire cabinet of members of the Fabian Society, a very heavily socialist organisation. What we see happening is we've already got voting being delayed for 1 year, then it's been announced a second year, and I do believe we have a dry run. And that the Labour government will call a national emergency. There was a poll out this morning, I think on yours, or I forget, that begins with GB, I won't say the full station name, showing that the most likely thing people think is going to happen is there's going to be public, basically a minor insurrection going on. And you know, Labour seem to be pushing in that direction to create the point where people finally snap.
Do you think that's happening? Do you think this is deliberate, Mark?
Well, forgive me, if you only have a look at the Fabian Society's motive and so on, and yes, absolutely. Okay. Socialism by stealth. Mark, absolutely, so that's what they're doing, yeah.
Mark, thanks for your thoughts on that, I appreciate that. Let's go to Grace in Ealing in London, who has some thoughts about this festival that is happening. Money has gone to it from the National Lottery, but also taxpayers' money as well, and they say that white people can't be on their board. Grace, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sorry to bother you 2 days in a row. I'm really bothered by colonialism and how it has completely impacted our world. It's impacted different countries in different ways, and there was a recent Nobel-winning prize given to research into that and how some countries have not been so devastated as others, depending on how it was meted out. But ultimately, wealth has been extracted from some countries, and it's helped to make our country richer whilst leaving other countries in a state of disarray. And it continues to some extent because our corporations and banks continue to extract.
Can a punk festival change things around, especially if white people aren't involved?
I'm coming on to that.
Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left of the programme.
My point being that it is not helping anyone at all to bar white people from leadership or involvement with a festival. It looks stupid. It is an attempt to try to make out that they're somehow virtuous, but they're not helping any of the people who have been disadvantaged by colonialism. We really should care about injustices in our world, I think personally, and some people who are non-white are seriously disadvantaged because of the ramifications of colonialism and the ongoing wealth extraction. But you're not helping anyone with a stupid, anti-white racist stance at a music festival.
I think that's a fair point. Actually, I agree with certainly the last point of what you said there. Is it racism, do you think, to say white people shouldn't be involved in this organising committee? I think it is. I wonder what you think, Grace.
I would say it's racism, yes, because it's based on race. I, as a white person, don't feel particularly bothered by it because most of the time I'm not disadvantaged in any way by being white, so I'm not feeling personally concerned.
But imagine there was an organisation, even a voluntary one, that said, right, well, you can't be part of this because you're a woman, or you can't be part of this because you're gay, or part of this because of any other reason. I just think there seems to be some sort of acceptance that racism, and it is racism, against white people is acceptable.
Yeah, and again, for the most part, we can do most of the things that we need to. So I'm not feeling hugely worried by it. But it is racism, and again, it is an attempt by these people to try and feign some kind of virtue when actually they're not helping anyone in the world. They're not making the lives of people of colour who are disadvantaged on our globe any better. They could be trying to help people who have been impacted by colonialism, but they're not. They're just making themselves look silly, and they're disadvantaging the cause.
Grace, listen, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. And it's absolutely fine to talk to you 2 days in a row. You have a lot of common sense to impart. I don't agree with everything you say, but that doesn't matter, because in my programmes we disagree without being disagreeable. One person a lot of people disagree with, and many of our viewers and listeners think is great, is Donald Trump for what he's done in Venezuela. This is his plan and what he has talked about.
We have to be surrounded by safe, secure countries, and we also have to have energy. Very important. We have to have energy that's real energy, not where they're getting 4% and 5% of the energy out of the ground. You take a look, it was such a disaster. So what's going to happen with Venezuela, I think, over the next period of a year is going to be a great thing, and the people of Venezuela will be the biggest beneficiaries.
Donald Trump there speaking yesterday. We will continue to monitor that in serious detail, of course. I'm here with Drive all week. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock and every day this week between 4 and 7 with Talk Drive. And no doubt Venezuela will continue to be a big, big issue. I want to thank the top team behind the glass who have made the show today. It's not just me, there's a whole team that help and work hard. Tom Willits has been the producer. Jodie McGowan was the setup producer. Dave Rhodes, the technical operator. Tech Up Dave, of course. Tommy Bateson, the assistant producer. Naya Servanchi and Luke Vincent have been the visual producers, and Connor Slattery, the video editor. Also, we've had Dean Spencer, who is the weekend editor, who's overseeing us all, making sure we do all the right things. Lots to discuss, of course, over the next few days. Jeremy Kyle is back tomorrow. He is going to be doing the breakfast show permanently between 6 and 10. The first one of those is tomorrow. The Jeremy Kyle breakfast show starts at 6 o'clock, so you can see that. You can also see Julia back from her Christmas break tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And just a reminder that after Ian Collins between 1 and 4, I'll be here at 4 o'clock tomorrow with Talk Drive. Thanks for your company.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And
Welcome to what may be my last interview with a man who may be Britain's last Prime Minister. I've spent 50 years on the TV and the radio. I've had a great time. In fact, actually, a man who could spend another 50 years on TV or radio is my guest, Nigel Farage.
I think 50 years is a bit optimistic.
I don't know. A lot of people think that you will win the next election. I hope that. But there is the chance, slight chance, that you will lose the next election. What happens then?
Well, look, winning the election, I mean, if I'm the bookie's favourite to be Prime Minister, which I am, doesn't say much for the rest of them, does it really?
By quite a lot, aren't you? How many now?
No, I mean, we've actually led the last 55 opinion polls in a row.
Yeah.
And they're in a blind state of panic. And Starmer can't cope with it. And he sits in Parliament, he stares at me. He doesn't know what to do. If I walk past him and go, "Morning, Prime Minister," they don't know what to do. And the Tory party, their leader, what's the name of their leader? Oh, and that Kemi, yeah. I mean, no, but you've got to laugh. James, we have a chance of doing something really historic, really genuinely historic. And there's a momentum out there, there's an optimism out there. They're going to throw everything they got at us, but I think we're going to do it. And I'm certainly not even contemplating failure.
What are you going to say to make those people who say, Nigel, he's great, but he's just a showman?
Well, I hope I am.
Well, you are.
Well, leaders are, aren't they?
Look at the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And there are some interesting and entertaining leaders.
Oh, without any shadow of a doubt. No, we are particularly mired at the moment. I mean, Italy's a good example. Meloni came in. Do you remember all the press? Oh, my God, it's all going to be a catastrophe. Well, a couple of years on, she's brought stability to Italian politics, which, if you think about all of our lives, what Italian politics has been, that's pretty remarkable. So you're right, all over the world there are strong leaders, differing opinions, but strong leaders. We are in a particular mess. But Starmer, let me give you an idea of the lack of leadership ability that Starmer's got. 5th of July last year, he's just won a blooming landslide. He stands at 11 o'clock outside number 10 at the podium. The rain had stopped. They saved all that for Rishi when he stood at the same podium a month before. And Starmer delivered a 9-minute address to the nation. He looked down at his notes 158 times in 9 minutes. He couldn't even deliver half a sentence without referring to the script. Now that tells me everything I want to know. That tells me that his form of political leadership isn't coming from there. It isn't about core values. It isn't about core beliefs. I find the lack of communication skills amongst today's leaders truly astonishing. Truly astonishing how low grade the whole thing's become.
What I think is you're putting script writers out of work.
Starmer doesn't even write his own script, because he admitted the other week that when he gave the Nation of Strangers speech, which they did to try and counter the reform vote, a few weeks later he said, "Oh, I hadn't read the speech properly." So you're now thinking, I know, you're now thinking puppetry. Someone says, "There we are, Prime Minister, just stand up and read that out, will you?" It's unbelievable. There's a complete... So if people say I'm a showman, fine. I'd say I'm a communicator.
I would. That is a word that is too often not used properly.
When I sit in the House of Commons now, I look around and I sort of have a quick peek at people's backgrounds. And you want a parliament with all people from all walks of life. Of course you do. You want social workers, you want former civil servants, but you also want people who've run small businesses. You want people who've done different things. I mean, 25 men and women in the cabinet. Only one of them has ever worked in the private sector. They are, literally, this is the public sector. This is the taxpayer-funded, should I emphasise, public sector that has taken over the country. And it doesn't seem to understand that if you don't create wealth, you've got nothing. And my fear is there's an exodus going on. As we speak, there is an exodus going on. The non-doms, the rich foreigners, they've left in droves. Many, many 30, 40-somethings who are ambitious, entrepreneurial types have upped sticks from America, they've upped sticks for Australia, they've upped sticks for Milan, who are doing tax deals.
Yeah.
I even had this week a friend of mine who's done very, very well in business, and he's leaving before the budget in October because he fears a wealth tax. And so we're losing rich people, we're losing rich foreigners who contribute a huge amount to the London economy. They're going, but we're also losing young talent. And you remember, I remember the brain drain.
Yeah.
The late 70s, the brain drain. When we were losing our brightest and best because we had income tax up to 83% and all the rest of it. Under Labour, we're going back there. And one of the biggest worries I've got is how do we get them back? It's a real challenge.
Well, I'm not starting off and didn't talking about the one topic that every time I see you interviewed, that is the topic first, and that's about the small boats.
Yeah. Start of lockdown, I was going out into the channel several times, filming what was going on, saying to everybody, wake up, this is going to be huge, because I could see it. I just had a feeling about it. It was funny. The deputy editor of the Sunday Times wrote in her Sunday column, she said, what a sad, lonely, desperate figure Nigel Farage cut out there in the English Channel on the boat. Well, she might have been right, I don't know. But no, I could see what was going to happen. I could see, if there's no deterrent to coming illegally, and then I went and filmed the first hotel. Well, hang on. They're being put in 4-star hotels, 3 meals a day, pocket money, free medical care, free dental care, and a chance to work illegally at the same time. Huh. I could see what was going to happen. So I was way ahead on all of this.
But they won't have had the most delicious piece of sea bass I have ever had when I came to your place and you cooked it for me.
Well, I'm a sea angler, have been all my life. Love all that. I mean, really, James, if I wasn't doing politics, I think I'd probably run a small holding. I keep ducks and geese, grow vegetables, go and catch a few fish, and just sort of go back to something very, very simple and very straightforward. But
I can remember it now.
Yeah.
The sea bass was absolutely delicious.
Well, there you
absolutely delicious.
I've now been tipped as a chef. How about that? I've done lots of things in my life. I've been a commodity broker and trader. I did that for 20 years. I did the MEP thing, of course, for many, many years, although I'm not sure I took it that seriously. We did talk all those years ago about you running for London Mayor. We ended up with Sadiq. It might have been better if we'd had you, James.
That's not my fault, by the way. We were going, my wife at the time were going to LBC, not to LBC, to ITV. And she turned to me and she said, they're taking you seriously. And I said, well, that's good, isn't it? She said, no. You need to decide before you go on air now whether you want to be an MP or you want to be a broadcaster. And I couldn't see why I should, because I'm quite a good broadcaster and I thought I could be quite a good member of Parliament. And I thought, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And if I do something wrong, if I actually overtread the mark, then sack me or fine me or do something like that. But why should I have freedom taken away?
Well, but this is, in a sense, what you've just said is a symptom of the modern world we live in. Look how our freedoms were taken away during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, not even in wartime did government restrict what we do to that degree. And now we're hearing that maybe we'll have national ID cards. I think Tony Blair wants to microchip us.
Yeah, I do.
But by the way, it'll be for our own good. It'll make us all safer. Life will be better. And I just don't trust big government. I think you and I are very similar on that. We kind of...
What do you say to the person who says, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to fear?
Yeah, and that's the classic argument that is turned out time and time again. But having a certain opinion, you can think is nothing wrong until it becomes,
Then you discuss it.
So, say you decided not to have the vaccine, and because of the vaccine passport hell we lived in for a couple of years, you were basically excluded from travelling, from living normally. The fact you didn't take the vaccine didn't mean you'd done anything wrong. yet you were still being discriminated against. So I don't buy any of these arguments. And we've always been very trusting in Britain of our governments.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Just some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Top of the morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the home of common sense.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan.
I'm very concerned that people get in control, people who have a number two priority on their mind. And when they want to be in control, they actually mean they want to be telling you what you can and cannot do.
People like Matt Hancock. Do you remember that? He's on the telly. I'm telling you to stay at home, this is an order. I mean, if I could have had a brick, I'd have chucked it at the telly. Some little pipsqueak telling me I couldn't leave the house for more than an hour a day.
I mean, we've got problems now with new measles.
Yep.
So how do you get round in a discussion talking to a mum and dad about little Johnny? He's ill, but if he gets measles anymore, he could be dead.
A lot of trust in vaccines has been lost. I grew up having vaccines.
We all had
as
it
you
done
did,
at school.
BCG, it meant you couldn't get tuberculosis ever, you know. A lot of diseases like polio basically eradicated. But then when the mRNA vaccine came along, I'd read a few doubting voices on the internet. I thought, no, I'm perfectly happy with this. I've grown up with vaccines. I went and had the first 2. By the time it came to the booster, and by this time, James, they were texting me, emailing me, calling me, you haven't had your booster yet. And I started to ask questions. But surely if I've had the vaccination, that means I don't need to do it again. And they basically lied to us. Do you remember the advert?
Yeah.
Could you look into his eyes? Meaning, if you haven't had the vaccine and you meet your elderly uncle, you're going to kill him. That's effectively what they were saying. And then we learned sometime on, they knew all along, that having the jab did not stop you from passing on COVID, did not stop you from catching COVID again. So there were so many lies told during that period of time that it's damaged our confidence in vaccines in general, which I think is part of why the measles problem has come back. The other problem is cultural. London is where the problem is.
If you look at different places in London where they're against vaccine for cultural reasons, these things are going up and up and up.
Oh, Dartford, just down the road here, has got a yellow fever clinic.
Yeah.
You know.
Yellow fever.
I've only once been kicked off Twitter, as it was. Only once. And that was when I put out a tweet to say that the Western Docks in Dover had basically been evacuated that morning because coming across on the dinghies were some people very sick with COVID. And I was kicked off Twitter. I had to apologise to get back on it because to attribute a disease with a certain grouping of people was considered, as you say, racist extreme. Well, I can sit here today and tell you that as we speak, diphtheria is spreading in the camps of Calais.
Yeah.
All right? A disease that we eradicated back in Edwardian England is spreading through the camps of Calais. And I think things are changing. I think they call it the Overton window. I think what we're allowed to debate is now becoming much more mainstream, much more real, because I think what we know is that this country has been the most open-minded, the most accepting, in fact the most compassionate over centuries when it comes to those around the world in terrible peril. The difference now, and I do think Blairism's got a lot to do with this, through what was called multiculturalism, we actually encourage groups to stay separate, to stay different, rather than joining in. And now we've got groups of people, James, large groups of people in London, who literally hate our way of life.
I don't have very much time left. And it's not a time when most people would really want to make an interview or talk about it.
Yeah, but you're James Whale.
Yeah, I must do something different. But I'm talking from this perspective of why on earth we don't do something to show the people who want to come here and who come here. And why do they want to come here? Because this is the best country in the world.
Well, yes, and...
It was.
And we're a soft touch. We're a soft touch. We're a soft touch. I mean, what sane country says that you can access the benefit system as quickly as you can in this country? You know, you can't have freedom of movement of people at any level or open borders at any level, all the while you've got a social security system.
Yeah.
And we're now learning the truth that, of course, net migration is making us poorer. All the old arguments about everybody comes here to work, it's all nonsense. Most people that have come here in the last 10 years aren't working. And I think the public are waking up to that. And that's probably why reform has done well. Firstly, because we cheesed off with the two parties. They both look a bit like, each other and failures. And secondly, because I've been saying this kind of stuff for a very, very long time, in the face of a lot of hostility, in the face of a lot of abuse, and people are beginning to say, do you know what, this bloke's right. He's actually called this stuff out, and been saying it for a long time and been consistent. And people want a real change.
How long before they get it?
I am not convinced, despite the massive majority, I am not convinced this government goes the full term. I think the economic problems that are building up are akin to the late 1970s. I think the debt burden just gets bigger and bigger. We're basically going into recession.
And you know who's going to get the blame?
Who's that? Not me. Not again. They can't blame me for everything.
This is what annoys me. I hear such rubbish spoken on the radio and the TV.
Yeah.
We've established the fact, I've known you a long time.
Yeah.
If you didn't want this country to succeed, you'd in America,
of course,
living in a wonderful.
Of course.
So would I.
The people that are supporting me, this is not a protest. This is not a two fingers up.
And you don't want that.
I don't want that. This is actually, and the events I do, when I travel around, people say, you're going to do this. You're going to turn this country around. There's a wave of optimism that we actually can do this. Collective will, we can do this. I mean, I know they're going to make it very hard for me. I know they're going to throw everything. I've watched what they tried to do to Trump in America, etc. I know this will be tough. You and I are very similar in this regard. We say to people, take us as we are. If you like us, that's fantastic. If you don't, we couldn't care bloody less. We're very similar in that regard. So I'm not going to be scrolling through the comments, on Mail Online to see whether people like me or not. I'll just go on doing what I think is right.
I don't want to identify where I am, because then I might have to have 8 burly security guards like you have sitting outside. But do you really have to have them?
I think the threats are very real, yeah. And I think, oh yes. I mean, I've had, despite having people with me, I've had milkshakes thrown in my face, pints of beer poured over my head, cement chucked at me, been hit over the head with banners. Oh yeah. I think the big danger is if it's pre-advertised where you're going. So, Nigel will be in Maidstone Town Centre at midday on Saturday. You've got a real problem. If Nigel just turns up at midday in Maidstone, it'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
Until someone gets their mobile phone out and tweets where you are. And, the hate mob is very real. And I kind of, you're seeing it with, take Palestine Action, take that particular group. They think using violence is perfectly acceptable. Those of us that believe in democracy think we have our debates and we'll sort it out with a pencil and a piece of paper come election time. So I think there's a growing number of people on the sort of loony left who think violence is totally acceptable. So I'm afraid the answer, sadly, is yes.
It's a bit of a worry when you can't have a debate, talk about it. You can do it tongue-in-cheek like I do a lot of the time, have a bit of a laugh. But once people take it so seriously, they want to hit you.
But it's also a lack of respect for democratic values. Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, this is extraordinary. Enoch Powell in the 70s travelled on the London Underground on his own. Now, he was the most controversial political figure of the day, but kind of that post-war period, we did respect the right of other people to have different views. And we might argue like crazy with them, but kind of, I think a generation that had lived through 1 or 2 wars understood that freedom of debate was what they'd actually fought for.
And that's the problem. Not many generations have lived through many wars now.
Possibly true.
Do we need a war?
Well, let's hope we don't. I tell you what, I've got a better option than war, right? Let's get an education system that actually teaches kids critical thinking. An education system that says to them, look, here are 2 sides to an argument, right? You're big enough and ugly enough to decide which of these you think is the valid argument, but they're both valid. Instead of an education system that says, here are two approaches to a problem. One is virtuous and good, and if you support the other one, you're probably evil and maybe a neo-Nazi as well. And that's how poisonous our education system has become. And if you bring people up to think like that, no wonder they think, in some cases, that violence is actually acceptable.
Thanks, Nigel.
James, you're a complete star.
I hope I've got more than a few weeks, but...
Well, so do I.
That's really made me...
So do I. And you never know, miracles do happen.
They do. They
do happen. Well, your career's been a miracle.
Yeah. Well, it has, considering I had no A-levels, O-levels, CSEs, or even a letter after my name for broadcasting.
You said to me the other day, you've never really had a job.
I haven't.